Hello and welcome once again to riffSobriety, and barely touching my 3 dinners, I am Craig Woods.
And I am Quién, and someone's in hands is in our house now.
Apologies, my co-host is currently trapped in the Black Lodge. And today we are discussing, as promised or threatened on the previous episode, we are diving straight into a rewatch of Twin Peaks: The Return, and we're going to see how long that takes us. James, you excited? Is this something to look forward to? I think it is.
I'm super excited. Full disclosure, I've not done a full start-to-finish rewatch of The Return since it first aired.
Wait, what?
I've watched the show out of order, and I've watched multiple episodes multiple times.
Oh, to be fair, according to some guy on Reddit, that's the way you're meant to watch it.
Well, he would know.
Yeah, I've not sat and gone episode 1 to episode 18.
Yeah, well, I have done, maybe 3 or 4 rewatches since it aired. And one of those rewatches was in the company of our guest today, because, listeners, it's a big moment. For once, we actually have a guest on this podcast, Woo-hoo! A proper one, and not like that fake out from a couple of episodes ago, an actual guest.
I'm a real boy.
Welcome to riffSobriety, my good friend from the big Glasgow comic page and associated podcast, Mr. Alan Todd. How are you, Alan?
Thanks very much for having us. I'm very well. That rousing round of applause there as well. Thanks, James. It's an absolute delight to be here.
Finally popping our guest cherry on this podcast. So this should be a good time. Alan, over on your own podcast, you're commonly referred to as Angry Alan Todd. And,
which I've been giggling non-stop since we started.
I always feel is a bit unfair, and so
thank you, man.
Part of my mission here today is to rehabilitate your public persona for the ears of podcast listeners.
We're going to dispel that myth.
It's a lofty ambition.
Yeah, so for the uninitiated, Alan is one of a motley crew of comic book enthusiasts over at the big Glasgow comic page, and they've got some good content. You should check them out. We will do all the plugs at the end of the show, as always. One thing that often comes up on that podcast, Alan, is that you've often been typecast as the guy who either dislikes things or gets angry about things. And full disclosure, the amount of times I have watched or listened to you guys' podcast, I put myself in your place and thought, if they think Alan is angry,
wait till they get a load of me.
I see, that's the kind of content we got you on for.
Craig is the Alan Todd of riffSobriety.
It's a cross to bear.
Although now Alan Todd is the Alan Todd of riffSobriety. So Craig, you need a new title.
It's getting too meta.
You are literally my doppelganger. So on that note, listeners, it's a full-on Twin Peaks fest from here on in for at least a few episodes, and we are, however long it takes us, going to run right through on a rewatch of The Return. Unbelievably, James's first rewatch, as he's just admitted to. So that's going to be fun. So we're going to start that imminently. This is the part of the podcast where I turn to my co-host and I say, is there any other business we need to discuss before we get down to the main course of Garmin Bosia?
Well, Craig, I do have something to talk about. Real briefly, as regular listeners to the podcast may know, we did an episode-by-episode watch/guide of Season 4 of Fargo, and at the end of which Craig suggested that I go and watch the rest of Fargo. He suggested I start at Season 2, but because I'm a total rebel, I've started rewatching it again. I've finished Season 1, and I'm on Season 2 now, and it's amazing how much more sense parts of Season 4 make now that I'm watching Season 2. But also, It took me a ridiculous length of time to figure out why Mike Milligan's called Mike Milligan in Season 2. I was like, why would Satchel, who spent so much time with Rabbi Milligan, be called Mike Milligan?
Wait
a minute.
The connections between the seasons are particularly strong in Season 2, and Bokeem Woodbine is so good in that role. He's absolutely spellbinding to watch. That whole cast it's a great ensemble cast.
Season 1 had a fantastic ensemble, and Season 2 has a great ensemble. Again, I'm really enjoying it. I can't believe I never watched it before. I'm glad you sort of poked me to do Season 4.
No, I'm glad you're enjoying it. That's great. Maybe we'll do some more chat on Fargo further down the line.
Well, there might be some more chat on Fargo later in this episode, Craig.
Good stuff. Whilst you were ensconced in the world of Fargo, I went back to but to continue the journey of a show I mentioned on here a few episodes back, a Mexican series on Netflix called Quién mató a Sara. Do you remember me talking about this?
I do, yes. You said it was a bit batshit. It went all over the place.
So I started watching it because I will watch anything in Spanish language because I'm just a weirdo that way. It's the only language I understand besides English, and so it gives me an adrenaline rush to be able to listen to a foreign language and understand it and not have to read the subtitles. But this show is insane, and listeners of previous episode, you will already have. I doubt you will have forgotten how much I gushed about this show and how much I was so taken away by the sheer balls to the wall madness of it. So it recently returned this week to Netflix with a second season. Shorter season this time round, only 8 episodes, but somehow they managed to fit another 3 seasons worth of batshittery into that 8 episode bag. All I can say about it is, James, you will really enjoy it. And I think people listen to this podcast who are fans of Twin Peaks and generally fans of television that is a bit unusual but uses the tropes and traits of established television genres in a really clever and experimental way. A lot of you will get something out of this show. I suspect for some people it might just be a bit too crazy. We are talking about Twin Peaks: The Return. I don't know that television gets that much crazier, but Quién, mató, Sara is a particular kind of crazy that I feel they only do in places like Mexico. All I can say about it is the final episode, they literally wrapped everything up to the point where I was like, okay, I guess there won't be another season until literally in the last minute of the finale, they just present this absolutely insane twist that has no relation to anything whatsoever, but which literally says, almost verbatim, has a character saying, so that's not what happened. I see. Well, we can't let them find out what really happened. And I was like, this is the kind of thing that does not happen outside of a 1980s primetime soap opera. But yeah, fabulous. I'm absolutely in love with that show. It's hitting all the right genre buttons for me in that sort of very kitsch way that I do quite enjoy. And there's parts of it that are really arts, like you can, particularly with that. That's now 2 seasons in a row they've done that right at the last minute, and I'm like, okay, you are just trolling us here. But it's fine. I'm totally cool with it. Again, it's a bunch of characters who are very unpleasant for the most part. But you do find yourself you do get involved with their lives, but at the same time, it's when one of them or one or the other of them gets disposed of in some kind of tragic or violent way, you know, you don't care that much. Part of you is like, that's fine. I could do without that guy. But yeah, if I had to coin it in a phrase, I'd say, besides just being pure balls to the wall, anti-logical batshittery, it is the show that finally answers that great question. What if a cutting-edge, twisty-turny Nordic crime drama and a kitsch US daytime soap opera dropped acid together in Mexico City?
It's a burning question. Like, I'm glad it's finally been answered.
Yeah, I need to see this answer for myself. So you say it's on Netflix?
It is indeed, both seasons.
What about for all of us classic Brits who don't speak any other language other than English out there? Does it have subtitles as well?
It does, yes.
Cool.
You'll be fine.
Right, nice one.
Providing you can read, James, I think you're okay.
I mean, I'll struggle, but I'll do my best. If our Christmas specials book report is anything to go by, you know, I'll see if I can get my read on. Does that count as books for the end of this year?
I guess we don't have ourselves a reader.
Hee-haw, the book.
How about yourself, Alan? Have you been watching anything fun in the last couple of weeks or so?
Watched a lot of Twin Peaks.
Besides Twin Peaks, because I know you have been binging Twin Peaks in preparation for this. I think you were already doing that before we invited you. To quote Mel's on the Damn Fine TV podcast, I don't think you can get too much Twin Peaks.
That's definitely an argument to be made for that. I don't think I've been watching anything else, to be honest with you.
Twin Peaks is a lot, to be fair.
Yeah, Twin Peaks and stupid YouTube things. Like, I kind of went down a YouTube rabbit hole. Lots of, flat Earth and lizard people, and no, none of that is true. None of that is true.
You don't need to be looking up that stuff. There's more than enough horrible stuff going on in the real world. Over here in the UK, we had what I can only describe as an absolute circus starring Dominic Cummings. For people outside the UK, all I can tell you is we've reached peak post-satire now, and I don't like it.
Yeah, The Onion and all these things can just stop now, right? Like, there's no point to them anymore.
Yeah. I never thought I would see a former senior government advisor trying to explain the Spider-Man meme to a
yeah,
to
that
the comments
literally
committee.
happened. How did that happen? I don't understand what's happening anymore. Jesus. And it's in that dressing of comic book insanity that the entire Cummings circus lifted the veil that bit even further on the unspeakable malignancy of this Tory government. But on the bright side, it's like, well, at least the grown-ups of the electorate ensured that we dodged the bullets of free broadband and a properly funded health service.
Commies.
We're left with the good guy who checks notes, talks about the piles of bodies that he didn't mind there amassing. Truckloads of bodies, if you will, to quote Max Cavalera and his new band, Go Ahead and Die.
Yep. Wait,
James.
Uh-huh.
Alan. Is this an episode of riffSobriety, the podcast within a podcast in which we discuss all things metal?
I think so.
Cue the music.
Roll the music. Hello and welcome once again to riffSobriety, the podcast in which we do that thing I just said. James, Alan, you
Yes.
both like the Cavalera brothers.
Yes, I do.
Indeed.
Yes.
Stalwarts of the Brazilian metal scene from way back. Classically, Sepultura, later, Cavalera Conspiracy.
Nail bomb.
Nail Bomb. Yep. Nail Bomb's an instructive one for this. This is their new band, the Cavalera brothers.
Actually, no. This is Max and his son, also called Igor, not his brother.
It's just them and one other, just a drummer whose name escapes my memory. But Igor is playing bass and guitar in
Wait,
this
what?
band.
Igor's not on drums?
He's not on drums, no.
No, he's not, because as I just said, it's Max's son Igor, not his brother, and his son doesn't play the drums.
But yeah, this was one of the first tracks they released, called Truckloads of Bodies. And it's very, very old school thrash. And it's what you expect from Max and Igor with the very political lyrics. It's very of the time, very of the moment. I'm kind of digging it. I'm thinking the album's going to be a fun listen. Give that a spin and see how your ears like it.
Alright. Press and play now. Looking like the start of Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead.
Cool, maybe Tig Notaro will turn up and tell Max Cavalera she really loves his voice.
For $2 million or whatever the fuck it is, she'll be in any music video without even finding out what it is.
The older he gets, the more he's sounding like Lemmy, right?
Yep.
So weird that Igor isn't playing drums. That's distracting almost in a video.
Maybe it's because he saw Luana D'Ameto's most recent
He just chucked it. He's like,
drum
yeah.
playthrough and he thought, well, I'm done.
He saw your post, he was like, that's it, drummers, it's over.
Do you think there'll ever be an edition of riffSobriety where we don't some way mention either Luana D'Ameto or Crypta or Nervosa or that whole area?
I don't know, but to be honest, I was considering responding to your post with Eleni Nota has entered the chat.
Same,
Yeah.
actually, yes.
We're supposed to be talking about Go Ahead and Die, and this is turned once again back into a circle jerk over Nervosa / Crypta.
To be fair, not enough folk are talking about them, so I think you're doing the Lord's work.
There is a comment on this video that literally says, this is Max and Igor trying to make their own version of Nervosa.
Did you make that comment?
So how are we enjoying this?
Yes,
Dig
pretty
it.
good.
It does remind me of Nail Bomb. It's a bit less industrial, but it's got the same kind of energy. So I think that album would be worth listening to. Give that a spin. Might revisit
You're
this
hoping
further
for a
down the
tour
line.
as well.
Oh yeah, well yeah, I keep forgetting that gigs might be a thing.
Dude, don't jinx it by saying might. At the moment, that's all I've got to hang on to. Like, I've spent all my money on gig tickets. Like, I'm just looking, going, oh, I've never seen them before. I've never seen them before. I have seen them before. They're rubbish. I'm going to go and see them anyway. At this point, I'm actually thinking about going to see Maroon 5.
Part of me is really choking to get back to gigs, but at the same time the thought of it terrifies me because it's been so long.
I don't give a
Anyway.
fuck, man. I'm getting vaccinated in 3 days' time, so I'm gonna go to gigs and just lick the floors.
Lick people,
That's
doorknobs,
something that happened. That's something. I had my first jab since the last time we
Oh,
recorded.
really?
So I've got half the chip in me right
Nice.
now.
That was the day before you.
How's your guys' 5G reception these days?
That's why the Hamilton is going haywire in the background right now.
No, idiot, the reason I'm quote-unquote going haywire is because instead of actually watching this video and seeing quite clearly that Go Ahead and Die doesn't have drummer extraordinary or Cavalera in it, you're talking about Nervosa and Crypta, again. With this barrel-scraping lack of research and attention to the podcast, we'll never get that sweet sponsorship from NordVPN.
Anybody that listens to the Big Glasgow Comic Page podcast knows that usually mine has got like a slight delay behind everybody else and it kind of throws it off. I'm
Not
hearing
this
any
time.
delay. Not hearing any delay. Thanks, Bill.
Sorted. Alright, so anyway, that was, I think, in a roundabout way, us appreciating Go Ahead and Die with Truckload Full of Bodies.
If you are listening to this and you're a fan of the Cavaleras in general, and you're missing Igor Cavalera's drumming, you could do worse than check out Igor Cavalera's YouTube channel that I discovered recently. He's got a channel where he does a series called Beneath the Drums, where he just breaks down his favourite drum parts from like old Sepultura songs and Cavalera conspiracy songs. Really good. The Refuse and Resist episode is particularly sweet.
I discovered it the other day and I was like, oh, a new one to watch. I've only seen the first one, but I really enjoyed it.
Yes, so good.
Good stuff, good stuff. Well, I will get that in my eyeballs at some point. Wait, guys, actually, full disclosure, I've just realised. Okay, I didn't actually watch the video. I only heard the track earlier. I've not actually seen the video that I just sent you. I probably should have vetted that. This is a very professional podcast, but it's just dawned on me that the Igor in question in this band is actually Max's son, Igor, not his brother, the legendary drummer Igor Cavalera, which explains why he is not drumming, because Igor Jr. is not a drummer. Yeah, clanger there, guys. I feel like somebody should have mentioned that there.
Are you fucking kidding me?
In the meantime, that has been another edition of riffSobriety. Rock on!
Nora.
Good ep.
Good ep.
Alright guys, let's do this. Let's go visit in a roundabout way that small town up in the Pacific Northwest by way of South Dakota, by way of New York City, by way of
Las Vegas,
by way of
Buenos Aires.
some nameless rural retreats on the way. Let's do it. So Alan, our previous episode, which you were not here for, James and I waxed lyrical about our experiences with the original series of Twin Peaks, what that show meant to us, how it absolutely permeated every aspect of our lives for the better part of 25 years or more.
Twin Peaks was ripping at you, basically.
Yep.
So I have to turn to you and ask, even though I sort of know the answer, what's your relationship with Twin Peaks? How did it come into your life, and how has it affected it since?
Okay, picture it. Sicily, 2018.
I thought you were going to say Buenos Aires.
I was there with a really good friend of mine, handsome chap, witty, debonair, like, you know, the whole 9 yards. Great guy.
Liar! You said that the first time you watched it was with me.
And you were like, I'm going to rewatch Twin Peaks. Do you fancy it? And I was like, I have never watched all of Twin Peaks. And when you were resuscitated and, you know, we got you propped up in a glass of water and some air, we were on the journey. So that was it. Like, we sat there, like, I don't know, over the course of like a month or something, we watched all of the Twin Peaks.
It was maybe 5-6 weeks or so. Maybe could be less than that. We did it pretty intensively. We watched these just for the benefit of the listener. This was what, 2019.
I'm saying 2018, but 2019. You're right.
No, it was I moved here in 2019.
Yeah,
I moved house in
that's
2019
right, yeah.
early. So yeah, it was.
I keep forgetting this is 2021. So
Yes,
like, I'm thinking,
yeah.
oh, it was like 3 years ago. So
So it was 2
like,
years after
ago.
the return aired, and I'd got myself a big telly a couple of months prior, and I'd not yet done a
did.
full rewatch of Twin Peaks, which was one of the things that obviously, as a long-time Twin Peaks nerd, was like, I need to watch the entirety of this franchise on this big telly. So
It's a belter of a telly. Like,
when I'm about to dive into it, I thought, now, James, you might relate to this. I know for me, I don't know how many people's lives I've made hell ever since becoming a Twin Peaks fan in the early 90s by forcing them to watch Twin Peaks with me.
at least one.
But Alan was one in a long line. And so I was like, I need somebody. It's gotten to the stage where it's just a habit and it's a ritual. Like I need somebody to sit and watch it with, just so preferably somebody who's not
Mad
seen
Twin Peaks missionary over here.
just so I can see the reactions and really enjoy the reactions.
Is that why you were staring at me while we watched it?
I'm sorry that it was perhaps not what you wanted.
Sitting peeling a tangerine, watching my face. I was like, okay.
With a video camera like they did from Lost Highway.
What the fuck is your name?
But it took a little longer because we watched like a bunch of David Lynch's other stuff in between times as well.
That was by design. I decided to do that by design because I knew that...
I figured that. You curated the whole experience for me and don't think it wasn't appreciated.
No, that's cool. I'm glad it paid off. But my thinking was the return stylistically is such a leap off into the deep end from the original series that I was like, maybe I should intersperse this with some of Lynch's other work just so that it kind of contextualizes what's to come. And I think it was the right play. I think it made sense.
Oh, absolutely.
So we hit all the big hitters. Some of the sort of semi-regular ones like your Blue Velvets, and then some of the real mind benders like Inland Empire. So it covered all the bases.
It's funny you mentioned that though, Craig. I remember when I watched Inland Empire with Sara, it was after The Return had aired, and we'd watched that together, and I was like, you're gonna love this film, it's fucking bonkers. You're gonna love it, you're gonna hate it. This is absolutely batshit crackers. And she was like, at the end of it, she was like, it wasn't as weird as The Return. I was like, fuck, The Return spoiled Inland Empire for Sara.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know that everybody would say that, but I can certainly understand that perspective for sure.
I think we watched Inland Empire, then The Return, right?
Yes, yeah. I made sure we watched all the movies before The Return. One of the things that I've always found about getting people to rewatch the original series, particularly as time has gone on, is that the original series was always kind of weird for its day, and it was always remarkable for that in some way. But see, the further away you get from that era, the more I think the tropes and traits that show was using become weirder by themselves. Whereas back in the day, those were not the weird part. Whereas I think now for like a young generation, who are particularly young people who are seeing that show for the first time, like people in their teens and 20s,
folk who have never seen Crossroads, basically. And not the amazing Ralph Macchio film.
Or the Britney Spears movie. Hashtag Free Britney. But I think a lot of those tropes now just seem like they've come from an alien planet for a lot of young people. But obviously you didn't have that experience because you're just not that much younger than me, Alan. So you had that same experience growing up in the 80s and seeing these very bizarre forms of entertainment that are grown-ups watched back in the day.
Yeah, basically the stuff that we watched on TV was what you see in the background of shows now as a kind of piss take of like pop culture in it. Like that was kind of almost the norm. That was the standard. Some crazy Mexican game show or whatever in the background on like some crap sitcom just now is basically the TV that we grew up watching.
Yeah, basically. So one of the things that you sort of missed out on, because I think we powered through the show so quickly, is you didn't get, or maybe you did, maybe you can correct me on this, but certainly being a fan back in the day and having been able to repeat the experience when The Return aired week to week was just being ensconced in that world and drawing out that experience and having it drip fed to you was just so thrilling. Now, admittedly, we powered through it a bit, but I think what we usually averaged about 4 episodes a time or so, I think.
Yeah, usually about that.
When you were not watching the show, was your mind lingering on the show when you weren't watching it?
Yeah, I mean, you know I'm a big shite bag, or a wee shite bag, like, to be more accurate, is in even watching Fire Walk with Me last night, any, like, you know the bits that I'm talking about, the bits where you get actual chills when Bob, like, suddenly appears or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, any of those type bits stick, or have stuck with me since we watched it a couple of years ago, and rewatching it again over the last few weeks has just kind of driven them home again. Bob is a creepy sumbitch, and I don't like it. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, Fire Walk with Me is like, I love that they had this sort of quirky, weird soap opera that ran for 2 seasons and got cancelled. They had some weird shit in it, and then David Lynch was like, now how about we make this a horror film? Like, oh cool, there's going to be cherry pie, there's going to be coffee, there's going to be, oh my god, this is horrifying.
Oh, there's going to be bleakness, horror, and just abuse, not only of the main character, but abuse of the audience also.
Yeah, but they throw you off by having Chris Isaacs as the main guy at the start, and you're like, oh, that's Chris Isaacs. Cool. Blue Hotel, wicked game. Cool.
I don't know if you're aware of this, Alan, but that was originally supposed to be Dale Cooper. All of the FBI stuff was originally supposed to be Dale Cooper, and the reason Cooper only appears briefly in the movie is because Kyle MacLachlan at this point was just wanting to get away from Cooper. He wanted to, I guess when you're still a young actor and you want to do other stuff and you've become so associated with this character, I kind of get it. And I think also, reading between the lines, there was a bit of tension between some members of the cast and David Lynch, who felt that Lynch had sort of just abandoned them really after things went shit in season 2. Because one of the things we discussed in our previous episode was exactly what happens at the middle of season 2, or just before the middle, when the identity of the killer is revealed. And the bottom does fall out the show a wee bit.
We then get the mad side story with James and whatnot. And
right, yeah, less said about that, the better.
I don't know what you guys are talking about. James has always been cool. James has always been cool.
James, I was going to tell you, you have always been cool. Yeah, I mean, that came about as a result of pressure from the network, which is insane now, looking back at that a network would kill a show like that. Why is it people watch this show? Because of the mystery. Cool, let's kill the mystery. Yeah, good thinking, ABC. But as soon as that happened, David Lynch lost interest in the project, essentially, because it's like, well, there's no mystery anymore. I'm out of here. That's between the lines, that's basically what happened. And a lot of the cast kind of felt a bit abandoned. And I think Kyle MacLachlan was one of them. So the script for Fire Walk With Me got rejigged after that, and Kyle agreed to do the movie, but with a reduced role, is what happened there. I kind of think it works, though. Like, I think adding in Chris Isaac, even though part of my brain is always like, okay, I can see how this would work with Cooper, but Chris Isaac has a whole different energy. He has his own MO, Alan, exactly.
Is it a Blue Rose case or is it a Blue Hotel case?
Well, this guy. I also really love the chemistry between him and Kiefer Sutherland.
Yes, the diner scene is dynamite.
Dynamite. Sutherland at that point was kind of cast against type, because at that point Kiefer Sutherland was mainly well known for playing kind of dangerous characters, and Sam Stanley is a bit of a just an oddball, goofy kind of milquetoast.
He can tell you how much real estate's worth just by guessing, though. Right,
just by scanning the room.
Can you imagine Sam Stanley, like, torturing terrorists in 15 years' time after that? Because I sure as hell can.
Yeah, what happened to him?
Who hurt you, Sam? Well, that alcoholism. That really played a blinder. According to Mark Frost, in one of his books, he claims that Sam Stanley descended into alcoholism. So he came out the other side, and he was Jack Bauer.
Damn it, Tony, damn it!
Don't drink, folks. In fact, no, forget that. Sobriety.
So yeah, given that we rocketed through the show real quickly, did you get a proper sense of, when we segued from the original series into the return, obviously this is Fire Walk With Me in between, and indeed the Missing Pieces, which I also made you watch, because I believe those are integral to the return.
I wanted a 2x4.
Yeah, that's the most integral scene. Absolutely vital. Did you get a real sense of there being a stylistic shift, or... I mean, there blatantly is one, but was that ever something that surprised you in a way that jarred you out of the story, or does it all feel of a piece to you?
It didn't jar me out of the story, but it definitely feels like a quarter of a century has passed. Like, maybe not in between Fire Walk With Me and it's maybe like 22, 23 years or whatever.
It actually literally is 25 years between Fire Walk With Me and The Return. In terms of release, yeah.
I thought that was from the end of the second season of Twin Peaks, but it's from Fire Walk With Me, right? Okay.
Yeah, the series ended in 91. Fire Walk With Me came out in 92.
There you go. Okay, right. So it does feel as if 25 years has passed. It does feel as if styles have changed, like maybe a bit more sophisticated or whatever. The fact that it's not all set in one sleepy wee northwestern town, the fact that it's more kind of all over, like New York, Las Vegas, like all the kind of places, like just made it seem like bigger. I don't know, like there was something a bit more. I don't know what the word I'm going for here, but like there was just a bit more kind of to it or whatever.
Yeah, I think when you look at the series as a whole, once you get to the end, and this is something we'll discuss more as we go on, I suspect, you can kind of see that the theme of the world being opened up a lot more is kind of really integral to the theme of the show generally. There is this idea, I feel like, in The Return that it cannot be about a small town because the whole world is connected, and there also is that sense of that the real world is encroaching on Twin Peaks in a way that's kind of waking it up from the kind of
Sleepy
self-obsessed
Blackwater
fantasy that existed in 1990 and saying,
for sure.
no, we're shaking you into the real world kind of thing.
Aye, it's an oversized 50s diner becoming 21st century.
Yeah, albeit it's a real world, populated by phantom woodsmen and whatnot, but nonetheless.
Plus, it gives you a much larger view of what Evil Cooper, who, by the way, I will refer to as Evil Cooper or DoppelCooper. I will not refer to him as Mr. C because it just makes me think of the Shaman.
God damn it, James, I've got that
Every
joke
time.
written down. He's achieved a lot in 25 years. You could say he could move any mountain.
Yeah, he's good.
It's almost like quite often he seems as if he knows what's going on, almost like he's coming on like a seventh sense or something.
That's our quota of shaming jokes.
Yeah.
I am shaming you both into stopping these jokes.
You're the boss, Drum.
These are references for a very specific subset of listeners.
So DoppelCooper, having it set all over the United States, gives a more grand, epic scope to his criminal empire and what he's achieved in 25 years. He's not just hung around Twin Peaks and been like, oh, I'm spooky.
Right.
You know, he's been like, I guess
Sitting there sleeping with everyone's wives and doing awful things. Like, other than sleeping with everyone's wives.
I feel like in a way that one of the things that DoppelCooper personifies, and there are several things he personifies, but he himself personifies that thing I was just referencing, this idea that Twin Peaks has to be ripped into the real world. He is that threat of the real world. He is all that stuff that you never saw in the original series. You know what I mean?
he is the FBI.
He is the one who knocked.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because I do think there are, in a way, in the same way that the original series played around with the soap opera conventions. This is something we'll probably talk about more as we go into the episodes and certainly future episodes down the line. But I do feel like The Return does deliberately play with the iconography of some of the major prestige TV hits of the last decade. And there's, for me anyway, there's a definite Breaking Bad vibe in a lot of that Las Vegas stuff. So that was your journey, Alan, with Twin Peaks. Is basically I made you watch it, and 2 years later you're watching it again, and I've made
And
you
I'm
come on a
still afraid of
podcast
Bob.
and talk about it.
Yeah. I now can't look in mirrors without like freaking out that there's some weird guy with grey hair going to scream at me. Oh no, that's just me.
Ew. That's what we all experience eventually, Alan. There's no escape. So, James, something we didn't talk about in our previous episode because we were a bit under the cosh time-wise, but as we were ramping up our anticipation for The Return arriving, there was the announcement that Mark Frost was going to publish a book called The Secret History of Twin Peaks.
Yep.
That was going to be published, was it just a few months before the premiere?
Yep, and this gives me particularly painful memories because I had a ticket to go see
that's right.
Mark Frost do a Q&A about The Secret History of Twin Peaks at the, I believe it was at the CCA.
Glasgow. Was it? I thought it was the GFT.
Yeah, it was the GFT because they're next to each other and both have 3 letters in their name. I always get them mixed up.
So confusing. And then you had the ABC just a little bit up as well. Crazy.
I know.
That's the Glasgow Film Theatre for anyone outside of Glasgow.
Yeah, and he cancelled because of illness. Couldn't believe it. So sad. But yeah,
He always ahead of the curve, Mark Frost.
he released The Secret History of Twin Peaks, or as I like to call it, Mark Frost's This Is What Twin Peaks Would Have Been If It Wasn't for David Lynch.
Mark Frost journeying into the X-Files. It's an interesting book. I'll admit, I enjoy it. I do enjoy it. It's not remotely what I expected. It's not remotely what I wanted. But I enjoy it on its own terms. I think it's fun. There's a lot of fun stuff in there. In reference to what you're saying there, I do think there's a lot of that season 2 paranormal proto X-Files vibe in it, undoubtedly. For anybody who hasn't read it, which if you're a Twin Peaks fan, I imagine most of you have read this book. But it involves, and Alan, I don't know if I've told you this before, but that book, it takes the form of an investigation around a dossier that has been discovered. And spoiler, the
Major Briggs.
the spoil, yeah,
Yep.
the dossier,
you
it
did
turns
tell
out
me,
was
yeah.
compiled by Major Briggs, and the person doing the investigation is Agent Tammy Preston.
Who, in the audiobook, whoever is doing her voice sounds like a better version of Tammy Preston than we got in The Return. 100% far more believable as an agent. Like, no offense to Krista Bell, she definitely does a performance.
She's otherworldly. Like, she's just like an alien.
I think
Yeah.
we can correctly describe it as doing a performance. But I think Krista Bell is way more Lynchian. Like, that is a Lynch character in a way that the voice actress, who's superb, does it on the audiobook of The Secret History, is not so much a Lynch character.
Yeah, she didn't have David Lynch on the set going, what do you want? Just be a little bit more snaky or weird, or, you know, do it like you are late for lunch. What? Like,
Act like this is your first ever day on Earth.
Annie Wershing, who voices Tammy Preston in the Secret History of Twin Peaks audiobook, has more of a sound like she would have been part of Albert's team in the original
Right,
series.
yeah, she sounds like a female Albert.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's very snippy, and I did enjoy that delivery. And I think, like yourself, when we did have this conversation early in the Return's original airing, James and our many drinking sessions at the Tron, where we talked, funnily enough, about Twin Peaks for 5 hours on end each time. But we both agreed, I think, in those early episodes, we were a bit disappointed with Tammy in the Return, because we were expecting something more in the vein of the character we got on that audiobook. And so it took me a long time to adjust. But once I accepted Krista Bell on her own terms, and I think we have to remind ourselves it's not just Krista Bell's terms, this is David Lynch who's put Krista Bell in this role because he specifically wants what she brings to this role. We just have to accept that's what David Lynch wanted.
bear in mind, I haven't heard the audiobook or read the books, but like, I liked Krista Bell.
Incidentally, spoiler, neither has David Lynch. He has not read Mark Frost's book either.
He's like, that's something else.
David Lynch was asked about this early in the running, and I believe his exact words were along the lines of, "No, I haven't read that. That's Mark's Twin Peaks, and I have my Twin Peaks." It's like, okay, interesting.
Makes total sense. I think the best parts of Twin Peaks are when those two Twin Peaks collide.
Yes, I agree.
You know, and then the second best parts are when it's David Lynch's.
Right,
alone.
yes.
It sounds very much like I need to read or listen to the audiobooks then, because like, I've only seen one version then, I need to see the other.
It's very technical, very like something like an NBC drama or an ABC drama, paranormal alternative history stuff. I really enjoyed it. Like, I loved the book.
Yeah, that sounds good.
If you're really into like COD, occult, paranormal investigation stuff, it's really fun. Most of it is
was
not
aliens.
actually about Twin Peaks, and I think that's one of the main complaints a lot of people had about it. And so that's what felt like a bait and switch at the time. I was like, what the fuck is this,
Yeah.
Mark Frost? But I think, in retrospect, when you see what he did with the final dossier, which is obviously what was in his mind for writing about what happened in Twin Peaks, there's a lot of spoiler in there. So, you know, it makes sense that he would not want to release that stuff up front. It's a fun read. I actually really enjoy that first book. The second one,
The second one, not so much. It's essentially, it's a history of the Ring, the old cave ring, more than anything else.
Yes, mainly
It's
focused
like
on that.
Mark Frost took the stuff he could write about without it sort of stepping on David Lynch's toes and went crazy with it.
The interesting thing about that, of course, is that The Ring was not even Mark Frost's creation. It was David Lynch's creation for Fire Walk With Me. And David Lynch being David Lynch, I imagine the conversation went something like this when they started writing together again back in 2012 or whatever it was. He would say, "David, what's The Ring about?" And to which David Lynch would go, "I don't know."
Mark Frost would say, "Can you elaborate on that?"
We'll elaborate on that.
No, I won't.
All this is a roundabout thing for me to get to the thing I was going to say at the start of this spiel, which is that the funniest thing for you, Alan, you'll enjoy this, is that the main character in The Secret History of Twin Peaks is one Douglas Milford, who, if you remember, is the brother of Dwayne Milford. Dwayne Milford being the mayor of Twin Peaks.
Oh, yes!
Dougie Milford being his cad of a brother, who it turns out was actually in the Air Force in the 40s, and then was later a government agent investigating all things paranormal.
You told me this when we were watching it, because I was like, all of a sudden, like, the mayor and his brother are fighting over, like, him getting married again, and I was like, what's going on here? And you were like,
I'm gonna put his head in the trash where it belongs.
There's a whole thing in the books about this guy, like, and I was like, what? And you're like, Major Briggs, and I was like, oh, right, because me personally, I think Major Briggs is like one of the best characters in the whole thing. Like, I think he's
yes,
amazing.
absolutely, and he's a fan favourite. We all love Briggsy.
Cool. I wasn't sure if it was just me, because obviously my only touchstone to Twin Peaks is you, and now James.
Yeah, so but it's a particularly delicious thing about the way Mark Frost approaches the franchise of Twin Peaks in general, is that even Twin Peaks at its lowest points, even at its most absurd and ridiculous, he will try and tie all those things together in a really obsessive way, whereas David Lynch is much more kind of, things serve their purpose and he moves on, and those things continue to exist in the universe, but they all exist in like their own nebulae, and they only come into contact with each other at these very specific moments, much like Jupiter and Saturn, if you will.
It's the difference between the long form television writer veteran and the movie maker / artist. They join together. You can't see what I'm doing with my fingers here, but I'm making the perfect circle. Appetite, satisfaction, a perfect circle.
A golden circle.
A golden circle.
Yeah, so when that book dropped, it did hype up our anticipation a lot more. But I do remember us having discussions, James, we started to get worried because we were like, is that what the show is going to be about? Is it just going to be the X-Files? Because I don't know if I'm into that, frankly.
Yeah, and seeing how when the X-Files returned, you don't want Twin Peaks to return, X-Files to return, that's...
It wasn't until much nearer the drop of the first couple of episodes when the head honcho of drama at Showtime, he was interviewed and he gave some slight hints, and he said, well, it's set all over America for one thing, and I was like, oh, interesting. That really that got my interest peaked. I was like, because at this point I was like, I had just been assuming, like most idiots, that it was going to be fully set in Twin Peaks. That, in fact, that's something I think we mentioned it briefly in our previous episode, James. That, and I'll turn this question on you in a second, Alan. But we had wondered, how do you continue that story? Where the original Twin Peaks left us, how do you continue that story? Where can you come in with a brand new way to investigate that story that doesn't just repeat what we've already seen? I think we were both quite mystified as to how that might occur. And so one of the most exciting things was, I'm here for whatever they choose to do. But I'm going to turn on you, Alan. When we segued from the original series to the return, before we started watching the return, did you have any preconceived ideas or guesses about where that show might go?
No, none at all. Obviously, it finishes with, that Coop has gone... Is this Coop? Is this the bad Coop? Is this, what the hell's going on? How is Annie? I don't know. And I had no idea what to expect. We then watched Fire Walk with Me, and I was scared to go to sleep for several weeks. And, still kind of check the bottom of the bed to see if Bob's there and don't like looking in mirrors. So it's affected me badly. But thanks for that.
You're welcome. Here's one of the things that's really funny when I look back on it now. See, for 25 years, I did not quite appreciate that there was actually literally two Coopers. Even though it literally says it, I'd always just thought that was David Lynch being metaphorical. And I thought that the two Coopers carry on, any mention of that was just a reflection of the fact that he had Bob inside him, and so therefore he was now an evil Cooper. So therefore there was a good Cooper, like his consciousness trapped in the lodge, and the so-called bad Cooper really just represented Cooper being possessed by Bob. That's what I always thought that was. And so right?
Yeah, yeah.
And when we got to literally two physical, in fact 3 physical Coopers, I was like, I'm an idiot. For 25 years, I just assumed this was the same guy.
Yeah, but look at the Leland thing. You're like, there was one Leland, or was there two Lelands? I always think there's one Leland. So I think it's something that just came with the new series rather than an original idea, the original intention, I should say. I think
maybe
they just kind of went rather than Bob possessing the physical body or whatever, there is a white lodge and a black lodge. There's two of each of us, because there's the arm had the doppelganger, right? So
it sure
everything has an opposite version, which fair enough. I'd like to see the opposite version of me. Like, what's he doing? What's he up to?
Being a criminal mastermind, Alan. That's what he's doing. I'd like to see the light version of me, to be honest. I'd like to see what he's doing.
I mean, it gets muddy. One of the things we'll probably talk about further down the line, James, is the relationship between Bob and Mr. C. That is not the same relationship that we saw between Leland and Bob. It's a the power relations are very different.
The relationship, here's the thing, I'm just going to come in here, I'm going to slide into this, right?
Slide into the DMs.
Slide into our DMs.
Dungeon Masters.
This isn't an episode of riffSobriety, Craig, come on, chill.
First of all, gay. Second of all, stupid.
The relationship between DoppelCooper and Bob is perfectly summarised in about 5 seconds of screen time in the last episode of Season 2, where Bob and Evil Cooper just looking at each other going,
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's their relationship. They're like, we're both out for fuckery. And it feels like Bob just hitched a ride, like, fuck this lodge. My boy's dead. Can I come with you? And DoppelCooper's like, yeah, I'm a japester, even though next time you see me in 25 years I've mellowed out a bit. Not really mellowed, just not quite as chuckly as I used to be.
Yeah, he's not high on the euphoria.
He's been hitting the fake tan something awful.
Yeah. Or is he just dirty? I think he's just dirty.
He just looks dirty, doesn't he?
There's definite grime in there as well. When you look at close-ups of his hands and stuff, he's definitely like caked in dirt.
Also cool as fuck though, right? I mean, I fucking love DoppelCooper. DoppelCooper's amazing.
Yeah. Shall we dive into episode 1 of Twin Peaks: The Return then? I should say, sorry, part 1 of Twin Peaks: The Return.
Sometimes given the subtitle.
My log has a message for you.
Yep. So here we are, 25 years later. When this first aired, God, I can't describe the chills I was having with this montage that we get at the start, with all the old
Twin
locations.
Peaks has never looked so misty
It's
as
so
it does
bleak.
in this opening.
And the old dead mill that is literally now dead. Man, that was quite a sight. I was getting all the feels when this first aired. Really brings it home to you, and that's something the show will do repeatedly, is giving you that sense that time really has passed in this place.
Repeatedly and worse and worse and worse.
And that adds a real existential weight to the story.
The first time I saw this, I don't know why, but I wasn't expecting the theme tune. And when the theme tune started, I was like, ah.
But I love that we start with that moment with Laura Palmer and Cooper in the Red Room and her saying, see you again, 25 years. What else are you going to start with? But I want to call out the screaming girl at the school. What is Lynch's obsession with that girl? And why is she relevant to the story? This is a question we might come back to.
She's having a dream where she's back in school. In fact, all of Twin Peaks is just an extension of that girl having a nightmare about being back in high school.
She's the dreamer.
I've done my homework.
Nailed it. Well, that's it. End of the podcast. We're done.
Yep.
One of my favourite things about this opening that we get every episode, aside from the scary droney gong with Laura Palmer's face in an orb, which is always cool, I like that when we see the top on the mountain there's like that wee building there, which I think in real life is like a power station or something. I always like to think to myself that it's the site of Major Briggs's station where he was doing his top secret business.
I assumed that because it is referenced in multiple places, that he has his little radar station to listen to voices from the woods,
yep,
rather than voices from space.
Listen to his space garbage. It's my favourite genre of early 90s alt rock.
I saw them live 3 times.
I like their early stuff before they sold out.
You've probably got a ticket for them, Alan.
Oh yeah,
the gig
absolutely.
tickets you've been buying lately. The Space Garbage reunion. One of the things I note here, I just mentioned that we get Laura's face in an orb for most episodes. As a matter of fact, at the beginning of this first part, we see her framed photo behind the glass in the display cabinet in the high school, which has got to be old footage. They can't have put that together again. That's got to be old.
Oh no, that's 100% the footage from the pilot episode,
yeah,
where the camera pans in on it for sure.
But it's the first intimation here of a recurring motif throughout the return of looking at things through glass and looking at things through windows and people being kind of windowed. There's a lot of that going on in Return, and we'll see one big major moment of it later in this first part. But I also like the idea that we're back to looking at Laura as though she is kind of remote. And this is something I'm probably going to talk about a lot as we talk about The Return, James, is the way in which Fire Walk With Me really did what the original series didn't, in that it gave Laura Palmer a lot of agency. And I remember one of the things I was a bit uneasy about in the early episodes of The Return was Laura suddenly seemed so remote again. And I was like, I don't know about this. But when you see where the show ends, I'm like, oh no, now I get it. I feel like Laura being a remote presence was deliberate. It was by design right from the start. And I feel like Lynch being Lynch, he's not going to come out and say this, but he wants to draw our attention to it. He knows the journey he took us on in Fire Walk With Me. He knows we're familiar with it. He knows that we expect to be more intimate with Laura in some way. And yet we never are, because even when we quote-unquote get her back at the end, it's not really her as we knew her. And even she seems to have forgotten.
And we also learned that the Laura Palmer we thought we knew was not the Laura Palmer we thought we knew.
Right, there's also that, yeah. That again, yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of that going on, and I feel like it's interesting the way in which there's even subtle ways in which Lynch is constructing the story at this early point, where it becomes less about Laura principally because Dale Cooper has made it more about himself whilst pretending it's about Laura. Like, he takes on this mission of saving Laura at the end. You know, well, we can talk about our interpretations of the ending another time, but...
Infinite coops on infinite loops.
Ernest saves Twin Peaks.
So, David Lynch says, I hope you guys like Twin Peaks. Hey, remember Eraserhead?
Yeah,
and suddenly we're in what I guess we learn is the White Lodge, or the fireman's station.
I know a lot of people refer to the fireman's dwelling as the White Lodge. I don't know about that. I don't know that I'm not entirely satisfied calling that place the White Lodge. It doesn't seem like a particularly joyful place, which is fine. Maybe what we thought we knew about the White Lodge was just wrong. That's fine. I guess that tracks. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I mean, but... certainly we are in the fireman's dwelling, because it is exactly the same place that we see in episode 8. So let's talk a little bit then about what the fireman says here. Firstly, through the prism of what we thought the fuck was going on when we first watched it, compared to what we think now. Because I love the giant's clues here, and I remember it being a real thrill having the giant back and giving Cooper clues. I was like, oh, we're back in Twin Peaks. This is great. That's good. I'm going to have an egg on my face from that in a moment.
Yeah, I 100% assumed that was going to be, here are your clues, you can go out now, and Dale Cooper was going to head on out of the lodge and investigate those clues, uncover a mystery. It was all going to be, nope, I was wrong. And
I really thought that, you know, the clues he gives him were going to be of the type that we got in the Season 2 premiere, the very Mark Frost-esque, these things sound a bit dreamy, but they will have some sort of literal interpretation. Now, you could argue they do have a literal interpretation, but it's a literal interpretation that's so literal that it's almost prosaic. Like at the end, it's like, oh, right, I see. That didn't actually solve a mystery. That was just the giant literally saying, no, remember that thing. Yeah, so let's talk about that a second, because let's go through what the giant says, actually, because he says, listen to the sounds, first of all. And through the gramophone, we get that creaky sound. That is the same creaky sound that we hear in episode 17, part 17, I should say, before Laura disappears in the woods. And so it seems to be associated either purely with the disappearance of Laura and whatever that represents, or specifically with Sara/Judy. If indeed we think those are the same entity, that's another thing we could discuss. Or both, because those two things could be inextricably linked. For me, those things are inextricably linked, but I think there's definitely ways of looking at the story that you can see those things separately.
I assume it's the sound of Judy, or it's the sound of evil, it's the sound of something corrupting, something good.
Yeah, that's kind of my take. Here's where I sit on all of this. I feel like this is the giant saying to Cooper, you've done this before, and the reason he's asking him to remember it is because it's already happened. So it's not, when he says remember 430, if this isn't him giving this information to Cooper for the first time, he's literally saying, no, remember, you've done this already.
You fucked up.
You need to fucking stop doing this, is now my interpretation of what is happening here. So they listen to the sounds, and then it is in our house now.
because Dale's fuck-ups brought it there.
Yes, possibly. I think that tracks. But the other thing that makes me think of, when he says our house, what house are we really intimate with in Twin Peaks?
It's the middle of our street.
the Palmer house in the middle of our street. And that's where the evil is. But it also could be representing the fact that Cooper fucks things up at the end so much that effectively the Palmer house is no longer the Palmer house. So literally something else is in our house now. I feel like they could work on that level as well. What do you think, Alan? What did you think of this when you first saw this? And what do you think now?
I'll be honest with you, I watched this morning and I was like, shit, I saw this entire series not that long ago and I have no idea where it's going. I can't even remember. I started writing stuff down. I was like, 4:30, Richard and Linda, 2 birds with one stone, you are far away. 2:53, time and time again, non-existent.
I think your notes on the non-existent part, incidentally, are better than my notes for that scene, which is just the words "mad floor."
Had I been more kind of on it, I probably would have put mad floor as well, because I was loving the kind of Donkey Kong-esque like nature of the floor. It was cool. I have no idea where it's going, and I've seen it before. That is, and it wasn't even that long ago.
It's weird that this is the only show you can say that about.
Yeah, this is the thing that I would say to anybody. I was talking to a couple of friends who haven't seen it in ages at the weekend, and they were like, "Oh, what's happening?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to do a podcast about Twin Peaks: The Return." And they were like, "Oh, I've never seen Twin Peaks," and I was like, "Dude, watch it. It is the silliest, most ridiculous, most entertaining, mind-boggling thing that I've ever seen, and I love it more than chips and cheese."
Strong words.
It is fantastic, but I still don't think I understand it. Like, I really don't understand it.
Anybody who tells you they understand Twin Peaks,
It's full of shit.
that
yeah.
person is full of
I
shit.
kind of figured that. Like,
Even Mark Frost.
I think we all have our own interpretations that work for us. At some point, we that's where we land. We have an interpretation that we feel is complete as it's going to be, and that's what satisfies us. And the reason it satisfies us is because I think no matter what interpretation you come up with, and I know we've discussed
could
this
be
before,
right.
James, is that. But there'll still be areas in it that are still a bit grey and uncertain, and that's sort of the beauty of it. Even though I have my own interpretation of what I think happens in The Return, there's still parts of it I'm like, I don't know how exactly that piece fits. And that's great. I still love coming back to those moments where I go, but what does that part mean?
this is how I now understand why you watch it so often. Like, and when you were like, kind of like, James is like, this is his first rewatch of Twin Peaks: The Return. What? I'm like, when I first like started watching it, I was like, oh, holy shit! I watched this like 18 months ago, like 2 years ago, and yeah, I have no idea where it's going. I can't even remember why Shaggy is in jail for like things.
Shaggy doesn't know either.
Yeah,
That's
well,
the
no,
thing.
exactly.
One of the things for me, and I think I meant to mention this in our previous episode, James, but it slipped my mind. One of the big influences that Twin Peaks had on me without me realising that it had that effect was when I was branching out as a young person, finding other things I was really interested in. When I started reading... I'm a big fan of Latin American literature, as both of you will probably know, because I've probably bored you about it at some point.
I am shocked to hear you say this personally, but I don't know about you, James.
And not all Latin American literature is magical realism, but it makes sense that magical realism came from Latin America, because even non-magical realist novels, particularly from the 20th century onwards, by Latin American authors, do have that same kind of quality, where cause and effect is kind of nebulous as a concept, and that's something I just started to really dig. Even though it wasn't like, none of that stuff was like in your face surreal, I just always loved that aspect, that there was this sort of element of the unreal in what was otherwise a very kind of realist situational narrative. Twin Peaks: The Return does this in a way, even though it's very in your face weird, but it does this same thing that some of my favourite novels do, which is I can have a complete interpretation of what that story was, but there's still elements where I go, I don't know what the author meant by that. And I don't know what this entire chapter here is even doing in the book, but I love that it's there.
It's the most
And I
Grant
love the way
Morrison
it's written.
TV shit I have ever fucking seen.
Yeah, that's certainly another fair comparison, I think.
I can sum up why I haven't done like a full start to finish rewatch of The Return and why I've watched parts of it recently. in one comparison. When I finished The Return, when it first aired, I've spent hours on YouTube watching people's like theory videos and seeing other people's like Twin Peaks Explained, and then ultimately literally hours watching Twin Peaks Really Explained. No, actually, thanks. But like, you know, I went in like kind of deep and was really into the idea of like, right, what do people think? What are other people's explanations? Whereas when I finished Mr. Robot, the first thing I did was, I'm going to go back and watch this again because I really want to watch it again now.
Yep.
Rather than going, what do other people think of this?
Yeah.
So I don't know, this, you know, I love both those shows, but one I wanted to immediately rewatch and take in again, and another was like, what the fuck did other people think about what we just saw?
I think there's a definite kind of communal thing about the way you receive this show, that it's interesting to hear how other people interpret it, because so many elements of the show are so kind of nebulous that you know for sure there's going to be other people who have a completely different perspective on it, and hearing them discuss it might ignite something in your own imagination that maybe fits with something you already thought of. It might open up a new path. It gives you a new perspective on things. It's really enjoyable that way.
Aliens.
There is that one video that guy did, and none of his other videos are about TV or Twin Peaks. They're all about fashion and unboxing videos, and he did this one explanation of Twin Peaks The Return, and it was the most on point one.
You really can't say just that guy and his one video. Like, who the fuck is this guy and where do I find this video?
I can't even remember it. Do you know the one I mean, Craig? It's the guy where he really focuses on the pin badge.
Oh yes, yeah. That guy, yeah, that one was good. I did enjoy that.
Fuck both of you. Like, who is this fucking guy?
Dude, man, we've watched so many of these videos that it's impossible to keep track.
And now I'm down a different YouTube rabbit hole. Thank you, chaps. Thank you.
The other thing as well about this show, even before The Return, Twin Peaks was probably, in fact there's no probably about it, it was definitely the show that I would look up more online content about than any other show.
Really?
And I've listened to way more
I'm
podcasts about Twin Peaks than I have about any other show. And it's incredible the amount of people out there who just have new things to say about it. Anyway, we better move on here. The other thing that I think is amazing about this is the name drop of Richard and Linda. Because of course, all the way through The Return, people were looking for mentions of Richard and Linda. And of course, when Richard Horn appears in episode 5 or so, everyone was like, oh, that must be Richard. When he appeared, I was like, so many people were like, oh, that must be the Richard. Who's the Linda? And then it's that throwaway character who has that one scene with Harry Dean Stanton in Harry Dean Stanton's Scooby van, who mentions that he knows a Linda, or he lives with a Linda, and everyone's like, oh, that must be the Linda. It turned out to be none of those things. None of the things are relevant. Richard and Linda are literally just two names that appear at the end in this alternate dimension or whatever. The alternate personas of Cooper and Diane towards the end.
I think because after doing their remote Skype rating of Twin Peaks The Return, they got to however many pages, and Mark Frost was like, oh shit, we meant to do something with Richard and Linda.
We meant to tie this up. And Lynch was like, I got it handled.
It's fine, Mark, that's just their names now.
One of the things that I always thought about right from the start when I heard those two names was it was R and L, meaning right and left. And in occultism, the right-hand path and the left-hand path are two separate things. And because I know Mark Frost is very into occultism, that's where my mind went. And in a weird way, I think it actually sort of works. Because at the end of the series, when quote-unquote Richard and quote-unquote Linda are together in that hotel room, you could...
The Lost Highway Hotel.
The Lost Highway Hotel, exactly. They have that, what can only be described as the most disturbing sex scene I've ever seen. There's something ritualistic about that scene. And a lot of people have commented that, you know, it is that whole Jack Parsons reference that Mark Frost does reference in The Secret History of Twin Peaks. And so the way in which Linda disappears after that, the left-hand path in occultism is more about intuition and more about challenging preconceptions. The right-hand path is like more associated with established doctrines. I kind of like the idea that when Linda disappears, Cooper has lost his intuition. And so he's still trying to look at a completely new universe through the prism of everything he knew about the old universe. And that's ultimately why he fails.
Please tell me you were reading notes at that point.
I wasn't.
This is what I have to contend with on a semi-regular basis, Alan.
I'm sorry, James.
This is why I make the stupid jokes and add in the funny sound effects.
I love you, James. You've always been cool. It's fucking
I'm
gay.
glad we got to share this beautiful moment.
Well, let's not start sucking each other's dicks quite yet.
But can we all take a moment to appreciate the inherent hilarity of Cooper saying, I understand?
Yep, Chinny reckon.
In the 1990s, when someone didn't say something that you believed and that you thought they were exaggerating or telling a lie, you used to pretend that you had a beard. And the longer the beard was, the worse lie. So, like, sometimes you'd have a double-handed beard and you'd say, Chinny reckon. Who remembers that?
No one at all, basically.
I also like the interpretable way in which the giant says, you are far away, as in, you are far away from understanding, as well as being physically far away, spiritually far away, however you want to interpret it.
253. What is that? Like
2 plus 5 plus 3 equals 10,
It equals
the number
10,
of
the
completion.
number of completion, yeah.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
We also see it as a time on the clock repeatedly. We get it towards the end in the sheriff's station. 2:53. And it's also the time at which DoppelCooper is in the car in episode 3 or 4, where he's having to hold in his Garmin Bozia.
Spilling his corn everywhere.
He's just having to stop himself from blowing chunks.
I don't know about you guys though, but the real question I have after seeing that scene is, what's Dr. Jacoby been up to?
James, funny you ask. When we returned to Twin Peaks, did you ever think the first person we would see from the old Legacy characters would be Dr. Jacoby? Because that was a surprise.
I
to me.
did not. And I did not expect Dr. Jacoby to be living in a trailer in the middle of the woods.
No, right, and it's
getting the delivery of shovels.
It's interesting just how much information that communicates just by that establishing scene. It's like, okay, that's Jacoby, so we know he's now a bit down and out compared to where he was previously.
The Alex Jacoby podcast.
The last time we see him was kind of Mandrake the Magician, and then like the next thing you see him is like he's taking this delivery of shovels in the middle of nowhere.
Yep.
And oh boy, we had some wild exotic theories about what those shovels might be for back in the day. And so did the online fan community. And the fact that it turned out just to be one of the more whimsical aspects of the return.
Dr. Jacoby is basically the Twin Peaks version of either Joe Rogan or Alex Jones, and it like
yeah, some amalgam of the two. I remember thinking, I think I said this to you, James, back in the day. Is he going to try and dig up Laura Palmer? Is that what he's got planned? Is there some occult reason why the shovels need to be gold? I had this whole exotic thing going on in my head.
If he's going to dig up Laura Palmer, why does he need so many shovels?
That is a lot of shovels.
It's almost like they didn't bury her deep enough.
Hey, I had a nice callback. It's a nice character identification moment, I want to say, when he takes off the goggles and you instantly see the glasses with the two different shades of lens.
I love though that you're like, okay, awesome, right, we're back in Twin Peaks, and then immediately it's like,
we're going to New York City. These establishing shots of New York, man, I love this shit, because how many times have we seen New York City on screen and we think we know exactly what it looks like? Like, there's a whole iconography around on-screen representations of New York, and this is a New York I feel like I've never seen before. Like, the weird angle on that on those overhead shots over the cityscape, it's like looking at an alien planet. It's like a place I've never seen before.
You could not drop the Friends theme tune in at that point, you know?
Right, exactly, yeah. Yeah, more like Evangelis or one of those 70s synth soundtracks that the Hamilton is so fond of.
Yep, although she's getting into reggae, so, you know.
It's expanding her palette. So yeah, we go into this room where...
And we meet Sam, the man with the most cushy job in TV history.
Fuck yeah.
Go Sam, sweet gig. Nice work if you
I
can
see
get
you
it.
sit here and check this thing out, like kind of... Oh, lattes. Cheers. Thank you.
But this whole thing, when the way this scene is established, like the droning sound effects and the literally nothing happening on screen, and the big conspicuous glass box up against the bare brick wall, I remember at this point thinking to myself, okay, this feels way more like Lost Highway than it does Twin Peaks. This is a different world. Lynch is pulling us just, and like you said, James, he gave us that little snippet of, here's a thing you might recognise. Oh, but no, we're going to this strange place. We're going to Lynch World. We're going way out there. And this is a place that's not particularly friendly to the uninitiated viewer. You know what I mean? The cinematic language that Lynch uses here, it's to an acquired taste. And if you've seen Lost Highway, and for some reason that's just, I get vibes of Bill Pullman watching the videotapes when I see Sam sitting here looking at the box. If you've seen that movie and you get that kind of reference, you're like, okay, that's quite an antagonistic movie for most casual viewers. And it's like, I feel like Lynch is telling us this is not going to be an easy ride.
Even all the cameras that are pointing towards the box all look like the guy's video camera
Robert
from Lost
Blake's,
Highway.
Yeah.
They don't look like normal cameras. They're just black boxes with a thing stuck in the front. Like if you had to make like a prop video camera and you didn't really know what they looked like, you went, okay, I guess it's a box with a lens. We'll put a light on it. It's a camera.
Yeah.
And there's so many of these little David Lynch technology inventions, even in like the first 2 episodes.
Yeah, and that was one of the
like,
most exciting things for me. It's like, oh, there's going to be a lot of Lynch tech in this series. I'm quite looking forward to that.
When they start having sex in the background, there's just like a bump, 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 bump. It's about to get so much worse. Like, it is one of the most hideous fucking scenes I have ever fucking watched. Like, I really don't like it.
Sam does have the best job, but it's like sit in your arse, watch a box all day, free coffee, sex with a lovely lady, and all the wood-chipped face you can handle.
One of the things I picked up on the first time I saw this, and then of course when I went online I saw so many other people had made the same observation, is that Sam sitting there looking at the glass box waiting for something to happen was like Lynch trolling us saying, oh, this is you right now.
Yeah. Have a latte, guys, chill out. I did make an observation watching it this time. Up to a certain point, which we'll come to later, the first episode feels like a sketch show. Like, each scene seems so disconnected from the others that it feels like a series of weird sketches rather than a full thing. And it's not until the first appearance of Margaret the Log Lady where suddenly it feels like you're not in a sketch show anymore.
Yeah, 100%, man. Like, the first time I watched it with Craig, I was kind of sitting there going, okay, it's all disjointed and crazy, and like I have no idea what's going on. But like as soon as Margaret appeared, you're like, okay, right, we're back in Twin Peaks. Like this is it.
Before we get there, I have to mention Tracy's first appearance because how do we know she's called Tracy? Oh,
I was going to say,
is it because Sam mentions it like literally 500 fucking times in 2 minutes?
Hello, Tracy. Thanks, Tracy.
This reminds me of, like, Sam is such a weird character, and it's a classic Lynch character, that way in which Lynch has a way of just exaggerating very peculiar aspects that you do see in real life, but he exaggerates to the extent where it's just not real.
Hold on a minute, hold on. You're trying to say David Lynch accentuates the kind of really normal, weird shit about people? Nah.
I'm making that bold observation. But what Sam does here, the way Sam behaves reminds me of when a child learns a word for the first time and just becomes obsessed with dropping it at the end of every sentence. Because that's literally Sam. Thanks, Tracy. Hi, Tracy. Okay, Tracy. Oh, you're a bad girl, Tracy. The first time I watched this, incidentally, James, I watched this with Saf, and she knew how much this meant to me, so we watched it in total fucking silence, because she was like, I won't disturb you while you're watching this. But at this moment, she did turn to me and go, what's her name again?
I like this approach though, because I'm fucking terrible with remembering people's names.
Same.
So I think if we all did this, it would be better, because you're not going to go away from that conversation going, man, what was that girl's name that brought me the coffee?
We have to mention Madeleine Zima's acting as well, because it's a classic Lynch performance where the only time people talk like this is in a 1950s melodrama or sitcom. It's like, oh, now I'm so curious, you're driving me crazy. And I love the sincerity with which Madeleine Zima delivers those lines.
Yes.
I love the security guard that's sitting there though.
Yeah.
He's like,
waiting for Bruce Buffer's introduction.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I was going to say that, like, Michael Bisping is sitting there waiting on the bell to like knock fuck out someone. Like, that is like the entire thing.
Introducing first, the girl with the unrememberable name.
Out of the red corner.
And still called Tracy. UFC references for the first time on this podcast. We're breaking new ground.
we're going to get those Joe Rogan numbers any day now. So after the most uncomfortable name-dropping scene, we head on over to the Great Northern again, where Ben Horn has learned to respect women.
Yeah, how about this new twist on the horn?
I kind of love Ben Horn's trajectory. Oh, I like it.
Trajectory.
Because I'm the only one doing actual sobriety here. Like,
for the benefit of the listeners, I have work really early tomorrow, so I'm being a good boy and I'm not drinking. I know it should be called sobriety.
Fuck you, Craig.
But,
Wait, you're not drinking, Craig?
I'm drinking tea, if that counts.
You would never find me not drinking on an episode of riffSobriety.
You're keeping that brand alive.
Other than the previous episode where you were drinking and I wasn't. But I'm drinking
What is
tonight.
James drinking? Let me hear. What is James drinking?
Oh, right. Tonight I'm drinking Brewdog Double Hazy.
Nice.
Which is wreck the hoose juice, as we call it around here. I learned there's also a triple hazy, which is like 9.5%.
That's when Angel, that's when
something.
Angel Hayes finally releases those 3 albums she's been promising for 5 years. The triple hazy. When that happens, you'll know about it because I'll probably die from the sheer shock and joy.
I'm kind of like excited to like go and find that one out.
What are you drinking tonight, Alan?
I have 1 bottle of Peroni and pretty much half a bottle of Release the Kraken.
That's a cracking wee drink.
You seem the same as I've always known you.
Yeah, I mean, that is the beauty of if you have known me at any point, like I kinda like have always come across as a little bit drunk.
Speaking of people who come across as being a bit inebriated, let's get back to the Horn Brothers. Actually, what I want to say about Ben is it's an interesting... This is basically a riff on his reformed character from season 2. But it seems a bit more sincere.
I kinda love this. The fact that Ben is not such a dirty scumbag. Like, he's kinda trying to be better.
There's an important aspect to this, I think, that we need to address, because this is really problematic, because the Horns are properly evil people in the original series.
Awful.
And they are
awful
literal
scumbags.
people traffickers. And it's like, how do you redeem this character? I don't know that having them eat carrots in season 2 and being worried about pine weasels is really enough. I think that having 25 years having passed does do some of the work here. But it doesn't stop me from coming away going, I still think you should be in prison. And I speak that, I say that as someone who doesn't even believe in prison. But I do think that given the parameters of the world in which they exist, you guys should probably have gone to jail for a long time. But okay.
Yeah. People trafficking, scumbag, capitalist filth. Yeah.
Yeah. In a nutshell, Alan, that's what we're looking at. A pair of proper Epsteins is what we're looking at here.
Couple of Jeffs.
But who have somehow turned into, I don't know, there are no good real life capitalists, so I can't think of an example.
Ben Horn was in prison, he wouldn't have been able to come out with the line, "Is that mother's hat?"
We also have to mention the fact this is Ashley Judd playing Beverly. Ashley Judd used to be a big deal in like the 90s. And it wouldn't be the first time a high profile actor has taken a very small role in a Lynch project. That happens all the time. But another thing Lynch does, he does that Tarantino thing sometimes where he brings an actor back who's not been seen for a wee while. But it is interesting seeing Ashley Judd playing this role.
Yeah, and she's not in the series that much.
No, and all of her scenes are with Richard Bamer.
Yep. There's one with her husband, right?
Oh, that's right, yes. Tom. Yeah, that's right, yeah. And in one of the show's many vignettes that amount to no resolution whatsoever.
One of the little sketches, yeah. Who's the new girl? A woman like that you can't call a girl.
Yeah, even Jerry is aware. It's interesting, even Jerry's had his awareness heightened. Must be all that sativa baked banana bread.
Yep.
For his creative sojourns of the solitary nature or whatever.
I'm guessing that his new marmalade or whatever the fuck he puts on it is a bit much.
This is pure Mark Frost, because I know fine well that Mark Frost will be very aware of the laws in a place like Washington State where it is perfectly legal now to do this. And that's why Jerry has that line. It's like, well, my legal business, man. And it's interesting that Jerry has found a way to be reformed in a way that would have been frowned upon just a couple of decades prior.
But he's still just massively a capitalist, though, because
of course.
He's boasting about the turnover and stuff, and it's like,
Ben and Jerry here are the ultimate boomers, and they've gone through the ultimate boomer journey, essentially, is what we're saying. So they have been redeemed, but they've only been redeemed within the parameters acceptable.
Yeah, they're no longer human trafficking.
Yeah, congratulations. Have a cookie, guys. You're no longer trafficking young women.
Congratulations on doing the bare minimum.
Slow clap. All that said, I love watching these two guys. I get a huge thrill from watching them on screen again. It's great having them rekindle that energy, and having Jerry being full Jerry, is magical. I feel like that's just such an appropriate endpoint for this character.
Yeah, a business suit can't contain him.
Yeah. And it seems like, going into the business he's in now, considering how much he talked about food in the original series, he's an expert on the munchies. It's all come together.
Wonder how many brie and butter baguettes he packs away after.
That episode in season 2 when he's like, the one where Dick gets bitten in the nose.
The little pine weasel.
They're almost extinct, and he's like, they're so good.
Oh yeah, they're incredible roasted. Yeah. These two actors are so great. Like, I love Richard Beymer. He's always been one of my favourite people on the show. I think he's the relish with which he's always played that character is great, and he's got great gravitas on screen.
Mm-hmm. Ben and Jerry are two of the best characters in the whole thing, and they are awful.
And the two of them together just have the chemistry is just brilliant, and I'm glad this is the only moment we get with the two of them together in The Return, but it's worth it. I'm just so glad we got it.
And then we take a little trip to the sheriff's station for what I've written down here as Lucy Flawless.
No, that deserves a canned laughter and Pee-wee's That Was the Word of the Day.
I love the energy of the insurance salesman as his determination to sell insurance just drops in the face of Lucy. He fucking legs it out of that station.
I particularly love his repetition though. I'm here to see Sheriff Truman. Like, he's like a cutscene character from a video game, just restarting the conversation. I have some thoughts on this. Before I get to them, I just want to say the first time I saw this, first of all, so thrilling to see the interior of that sheriff station again. I remember squeeing so
Very
hard the
so.
first time it appeared. And then we see Lucy back behind the desk. Massive squeeze. It's so great to see her.
Yes.
Here are my thoughts on this though. Looking at this from the metaphysical perspective of what The Return could be all about. I get huge, what I call the Lynch gatekeeper persona. Because there's always there's quite often in Lynch's work, there's a gatekeeper scene. I'll explain what I mean by that. In Eraserhead, you get the man in the planet who pulls the lever, and I feel like that's what kicks off the whole of Henry's journey. And it's like, what if he'd pulled a different lever? Something else could have happened. In Inland Empire, you get the scene with the Phantom, and the Polish character whose name I forget, but who becomes kind of an avatar of Jack Rabbit as the film goes on, who I also feel is the gatekeeper, and the Phantom is actually asking for permission to enter. And I feel like Lynch has these coded ways of introducing the idea very, very subtly that what if another path had been taken? What if, like Lucy is literally saying to this guy, which Sheriff Truman do you want? It could make a difference. And it's like, on some cosmic level, I like to think that this is not so much a literal representation of the sheriff's department as it is a version of that gatekeeper motif within the cosmos of Twin Peaks that Cooper kind of fucks up. Like, what if some other path had been taken? I don't know literally how it works, but there's just that part of my brain is like, I feel like Lynch put this in here for a reason. We never see this guy again. It's never brought up. And I know that Lynch never puts these things in by accident, especially not right at the start of the story. I feel like it's a definite intention there.
I felt like it was a bit more simple, where it was like, well, we didn't get Harry Truman back, so let's drop a scene in to see but his brother's here.
It definitely performs that function as well, for sure. Yeah, it lets us know that
both
we might
are
not be seeing
like
Harry
completely
Truman.
legitimate, but like I like the first interpretation. That seems to me to be the whole David Lynch thing. Is like, what if?
What if he'd said it was Harry Truman that he wanted to see?
Right, we could have seen a whole other universe, basically. Yeah.
It completely depends on that 1 second.
Do you want the new Twin Peaks that's all fucked up, or do you want the original Twin Peaks? And the fact the guy can't decide sort of reflects our desire to see something new mixed with our innate desire to get the old stuff back. It's a constant dichotomy that there's no resolution to.
I mean, I would have loved Michael Onken to have been in it again.
I would as well. I was really hoping he would turn up.
Yes.
I also think there's something sort of relevant about the fact that he's wanting to sell insurance. I feel like insurance as a concept in Return is given a kind of cosmic quality, because when Cooper is quote-unquote reborn as Dougie, he is of course an insurance agent. And there's this idea that Cooper is trying to ensure the world gets a better future, that Cooper tries to ensure Lorna Palmer's survival. So I feel like there is something thematic going on there with that. We segue from there, of course, into Lynch letting us know that no, we're not getting this. The choice you're making is not the original Twin Peaks. That ain't happening. Because where are we going? Straight into the Lynch remix of American Woman.
This is the first time in 25 years since the very end of Twin Peaks Season 2 that we've got a glimpse of evil Coop.
And it's amazing.
And boy, he just explodes onto the screen the way he
does.
takes out that guy at the door.
Even just when he gets out the car, as soon as you see him, I remember just going, yes! Because we did not, let's remind ourselves, we did not see any promo images of Cooper at all. Lynch kept them under his hat. He showed the image of Cooper in the suit as he appears in the Red Room, but we did not see this version of Cooper. So when he appeared, I was like, holy shit.
Fuck.
I find DoppelCooper legitimately scary. This is a scary guy.
Yes.
And I love that quietness that McLaughlin plays the character with. There's, as you said earlier, there's none of the kind of goofy, giggly. There's none of the Wyndham Earls. You know what I mean? DoppelCooper is a very quiet, laid-back character, and he's like a predator lying in wait. You know, he's like a snake just waiting for its prey, just waiting to strike, kind of thing. I find him legitimately terrifying.
So you know
it's
how
the
in the
first time
series,
that he says, "I don't need the information. I want the information." You're like, "Oh shit." Like,
I think he embodies that right from the start,
scary.
even before he's issued a line. I feel like, obviously, those dark eye contacts do a lot of the work as well. They give him that sort of reptilian quality. But fuck, man, I find him immediately chilling.
You know how in the original run of Twin Peaks, whenever you see Bob revealing himself through Leyland stops being kind of like and starts being all like
yes, yeah,
and kind of a goof bag, and there's none of that here, and that gives me the impression that DoppelCoop is just so immensely powerful that he just holds Bob in place.
Mm-hmm. I think the other thing as well, because we know that Bob feeds on Garmin Bosia, and we know how much misery Cooper has caused.
Garmin Bosia!
How many lives has he ruined at this point? I feel like Bob is so fucking high on the Garmin Bosia. He's like on. It's like when a junkie gets the hit. You know, he's just constantly zoned out the entire time.
Or he's like in a turkey coma at Christmas.
Exactly.
Question for you guys. Who is the most David Lynch character ever to be portrayed on screen, and why is it Otis?
I was going to say, why is it Beulah? This whole tableau is uber Lynchian. This gives me big vibes of that classic period of Lynch when I first got into him around the time of Twin Peaks. It's got very Wild at Heart, Blue Velvet vibes, of just a room full of very oddball characters. I love Otis. I love Beulah. These guys in the background... Part of me,
Iggy Pop just chilling in the corner.
Right, yes. Part of me finds this a bit problematic. Like, it's back to Lynch just throwing disabled people in because they look a bit weird. But that aside, man, this whole scene is just incredible. The mise en scène is fucking amazing, and the way Cooper just sits down and Otis just gives it, Mr. C, Mr. C. It's like, who are these people? How long has he known them? And you get that real sense of there's a rich history between these characters. And they all have this simultaneous respect for Mr. C, but there's that element of fear.
You say element of fear, I think like it's fucking like overloaded with fear. Like kind of like every single person in that scene is going, "Oh Jesus Christ!"
It's a real foreboding.
Please don't let me say the wrong thing here. Like
it's got Lynch's
awful.
Some of Lynch's best sound design in this scene as well. Like the drones in the background are amazing.
Yeah,
they just keep you so on edge. Also, I don't know about you. I feel like I can fucking smell this place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love when Shotgun Guy comes in for a second go. It's just like just moves his arm and knocks him out with the shotgun.
It's when the guy appears in the doorframe, just Cooper's kind of slight twist, slight kind of rictus change, as if to say, "Really, man."
Yes.
But yeah, the one
and that is
the
almost every fucking scene with DoppelCooper in those kind of situations, like for the entire series, like when it gets to that point where like he's like kind of just like meeting some guy where you're like, he should probably be afraid here. Like no, nope.
That's being the one guy stupid enough to try and press the issue. I feel a bit bad for this guy. You know, I thought Otis or somebody said, "Hey man, it's cool. We know this guy. It's all good."
Just don't fucking arm wrestle him if you know what's good for you.
But yeah, the sheer comedy of the guy being forced to whack himself in the face is just so fucking funny. These two actors, Otis and Beulah, where do you find such actors with these faces?
I think David Lynch is the Rolodex of these people. Like, you need this guy who looks like he's almost semi-crazy, but like maybe not, and like, I've got the guy.
Another thing I want to shout out here, when Daria and George Griffith, who plays that fucker Ray, appears.
You mean Daria and Scottish comedian Kevin Bridges?
I think they're both great in their roles, but one of the things that strikes me about the two of them is I know that Lynch is really concerned with actors' physical appearances as much as anything else, and when you get that two-shot of Daria and Ray standing together the first time you see them, there is 100% weird comedy in the fact that he cast an actress whose eyes are a little bit too far apart and an actor whose eyes are a little bit too close together. And it's the kind of thing on your own you wouldn't notice it, but you see the two of them standing next to each other, it's like, holy shit.
Ray's whole face is just a little too small for his head.
Yes. He's like a Dick Tracy villain.
And what I love about Ray is Ray's not afraid of DoppelCooper.
No, that's true. He's the one person in the room who seems definitely not afraid of Cooper, which is interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, he's got something else going on.
It's like, are you insane or are you really just fearless? I'm not sure. Like,
yeah, that bit you were talking about earlier, where he's like, "I don't need, I want," when they're in the diner, and everyone else, like Jack's too busy working on his 3 dinners, and Daria looks terrified.
Yeah, Daria tries her best to keep it together, but you can tell she's struggling.
And Ray's just like smirking away, like
giggling at his own jokes and whatnot.
So good.
Yeah, so Tracy sneaks in. That's her name, in case you've all forgotten it. But I love Tracy's line here where she says, "Let's not overthink this opportunity," because that is literally David Lynch saying to us, like, I know there's holes all over this plot. Just don't worry about it. It's fine.
To be fair, that is exactly how I live most of my life. It's like, let's not overthink this opportunity. Like, let's go. Like, do it. And it doesn't end well.
So here, you kind of went in deep on it already, Alan, with what occurs in this moment. I want to discuss it for a moment just in the context of what we know in terms of how the series ends. So we know that this figure will reappear later, and this is the figure we come to associate with Judy. Although it does appear slightly different in the box, like the face is different, but it is credited to the same actor, and it is credited to the experiment is how it's credited in the credits. Make of that what you will. So, given that we know at the end of season 2 this is how Cooper makes his escape from non-existence, he passes through here, there's some questions we need to ponder here. Given that we know Mr. C from The Shaman as the nameless billionaire, he set up this box.
Coming on like a 7 cents.
Did Mr. C create this box with the intention of capturing Judy, or with the intention of capturing Cooper on his way out of the lodge, or both?
I think the former rather than both, because he's got that really good drawing of Judy later on the card. He says, "This is what I'm after."
It's almost as good as Rita Farr's drawing of the terrifying Dr. Time.
Hey, Rita Farr's drawing of the terrifying Dr. Time was bang on accurate. You take that back.
I'm sorry I made fun of
it. Dead on, balls, accurate, I think you'll find. Yeah.
So, what makes this complicated is later in the return, we know that Mr. C does not associate the name Judy with the thing he's looking for, because he still feels he does not know who or what Judy is when he confronts Jeffries. So that's what makes this all a bit muddy, and by muddy I don't mean the guy at the farm. Are you ready? Not that guy.
You mean Waters?
So yeah, I mean, again, we can say this forever. David Lynch is not going to give us the answer. We have to come up with it by ourselves. I think I'll probably swing more towards it is designed to capture Judy, but it is interesting it captures Coop. But I guess where I'm a bit grey on it is because it seems like, I suppose we don't know this for sure, but could it be, why does this thing appear in the box at this moment? Is it because of what Sam and Tracy are doing, or is it because it's following Cooper?
Oh, I always assumed it's because of Sam and Tracy getting it on.
That was my thought, yeah.
I feel like that's definitely a part of it, because they're doing the same Jack Parsons sex ritual unwittingly that I think Richard and Linda are doing.
Yeah, to summon Judy later on.
The whole ritualistic thing was either love or fear.
Oh, you're tying it back to the classic lore there. Yeah, I guess it works.
I
guess
don't
it
know.
works.
That was my thought. It was like love was the whole thing. Was like kind of.
Is what's happening between Sam and Tracy love? Seems more like lust.
I don't know. I think he loves her. He says her name a lot.
Yeah,
He is literally obsessed with her. He says her name constantly.
When it comes to lust, like it is more compatible with love than it is.
Yeah,
with
no, that's true.
anything else.
That's true.
Like, you know,
Sure. Yeah, no, I take your point. It does kind of work. The reason I bring that up is because in part 3, when Cooper is in that room in the Mauve Zone and he meets the girl who apparently is not Ronette Pulaski but is played by Phoebe Augustine.
Hashtag American Girl, the David Lynch remix.
Ronette or not Ronette, depending on how you look at her, warns Cooper, says, hurry, my mother is coming. And we come to associate Judy with also this kind of mother figure. Which makes me think that Judy is somehow chasing Cooper, and that's what makes Judy arrive in the box. But how could Mr. C have foreseen that? Which makes me think, surely it must just be down to what Sam and Tracy are doing. Is it all down to one massive cosmic coincidence? I mean, there's no reason why it can't be.
I think there's a reason why your UFC security guard is specifically not there to allow that to happen on
Right,
Mr. C's
I was
orders.
actually going to come up with that as a theory, yeah.
And I think that, I don't know if I'm just reading it too literally, but as I told you, when we talked about this, like, when it was first on, Craig, you were like, coming out with all these theories. I was like, look, man, I take it literally what I see on the screen is what's happening. What I assume is that specific point in space, which is that high up and why he's got the box there at the top of a skyscraper, is a point where something coming from the great beyond that all of these weird otherworldly creatures are, and that's a place you can trap them if they come out that way.
Yeah.
That's why Ordale goes in there on his way out.
Yeah, no, I can definitely dig that, but I guess it's just the timing is what I'm looking at as being the great cosmic coincidence. It just makes it seem that Judy is manifesting at the same time that Cooper is on his journey. I mean, I guess if that didn't
we're not talking about Judy.
If that didn't happen at the same time, I guess we wouldn't have a story. So, whatever.
I also love that Sam just gets up and fucks off out the room for 2 minutes to check in his coffee.
Yes. It's literally the only time anything happens. Isn't it also? It's like buses.
You wait ages for cosmic entities to appear in a box.
One thing I do like, by the way, is when he looks in that that windowless bathroom, and you get just the shot at the side of the mirror above the sink. I remember the first time I saw it, you get instant, oh, how's any?
Yep. So the Judy / the experiment / mother
does a lot of slashing. There sure are some slashings going on.
with their big buzzsaw Coop.
It's the evil doppelganger of Audrey from Little Shop of Horrors.
Yep. Not Audrey Horne, the other
No,
Audrey.
we won't be seeing her for a while. Sorry, fans. You are going to be hella frustrated.
But yeah, I love that. It's such a classic Lynch moment of violence. It's like, what's the most violent way this creature could murder these two people? What if it was just like they were being pushed into a wood chipper?
Yeah, just nondescript slashing. And it's a classic lo-fi Lynch effect as well, which I really enjoy. It's like, just throw more blood on them, make it look like it's splattering.
Yeah, let's go to the Fargo section of Twin Peaks. Ruth's neighbour's dog Armstrong smells that something's fucking rotten in the apartment building, and she calls in the cops for one of my favourite scenes in the first 2 episodes, where they attempt to try and find a key for Ruth's apartment.
This whole scene is a delight.
It also introduces yet another plot thread which will never be resolved, which is Max Perlich, whatever the fuck he's up to.
Chip ain't got no phone! Yeah. It's all mine, Harvey. Harvey! He's ranting at an imaginary cartoon rabbit.
Harvey, do you send the cops to my place of work?
It's mine this time, Harvey. You mean Chip?
Also,
Chip ain't got no phone. Chip needs that money to buy a phone.
Yeah, Chip doesn't have a phone because Max Perlich's combined his phone with his, because his phone's fucking massive. I don't know if you noticed, but I know Max Perlich's like a wee guy, but the size of his phone is ridiculous.
It's a Voltron phone. Yeah. So I kind of feel on some level that this whole debacle that unfolds with Ruth's neighbour, sending the cops back and forth, handing them a bunch of names, and then all the while it turns out she had the key to Ruth's apartment on her the whole time. It's kind of a microcosm of Twin Peaks The Return's entire narrative.
Cooper had the key all along.
Yeah, he was the Richard in all of this. Cooper, you dick, literally.
But yeah, we get one of my favourite special effects. When they find Ruth quote-unquote's body lying in bed, they draw back the duvet when all the rest of the cops show up, and There's a man's body without a head, and Ruth's head without a body.
What?
Quick shout out to every member of the cast in all of this, because the first two cops are so good. I love how aggravated the dark-haired guy, particularly, you can see he's getting with what's her name. And then when Brent Briscoe, press F. And he and Jane Addams have a great on-screen chemistry, and I love Jane Addams. She's one of my favourite actors. The fact that she was working with Lynch at all, I was like, great.
Yeah.
I was so happy when her name was announced, and she got to play a great character. And the one who finally melted Albert Rosenfield's heart.
Because she is the female Albert.
Literally.
She's amazing. Again, she might be my favourite character in The Return, and as we spoke last episode, Albert's my favourite character in the original run, so I definitely have a type when it comes to who's my favourite character in a TV show.
Get a life, punk.
First time I saw this, I remember thinking to myself, okay, it is going to be sort of original Twin Peaks, but in a different town. So part of me was thinking, all right, there is going to be that sort of steady week by week thing going on, and that didn't happen. That didn't happen. They almost wrap up this entire story in these first two parts. I say wrap up in the way that anything in The Return is quote unquote wrapped up.
And then we cut back to press F. I don't know about you, but man, the feels I got watching this the first time, and actually just recently rewatching it.
I think this is actually my favourite part of this first part of the Return. I remember the first time I saw this scene, it just hit so many buttons. Having Hawk walking through the woods at night with the old Glastonbury Grove theme tune from the season 2 finale.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, and the log lady. We have to talk about Catherine Coulson's performance in this.
Margaret, let's give her a fucking name.
Oh yeah, Margaret is the log lady's name. Yeah, but Catherine Coulson does such a great job here, and it's such a brave performance. I think we have to remind ourselves and everyone, Catherine Coulson was literally dying when this was shot, and she died, I think, like within days or within weeks, a couple of weeks of her shooting her stuff.
Oh really?
That's incredible, man. Yeah, she died not long after they shot all this.
I knew she was really unwell, but I did not realise that she died like within days.
I think it's an incredibly courageous performance, given that here she is portraying this iconic character who has been portrayed as being at death's door, as she was in real life. And some of the things she gets to say in this over the course of the Return, I feel like, I mean, who knows what went on between Lynch and Coulson on set, but I feel like Catherine Coulson was given a lot of agency.
Not even The Return, like what she says, like in every scene she's in, is phenomenal. Like there's not a line that she says which isn't important. Like I think she is integral to the entire program. Like
she was always kind of the oracle in the original series, and something that the Return does really powerfully is by showing Margaret at her weakest, lets you know this is a world that is dying in a way, you know, and it really hammers home one of the elements of the Return which I think is sort of inescapable, which is that idea that you cannot go home, you know, it's not going to be the same place.
Yes.
Yeah, and it really adds that tragic element to that.
I also love the fact that Hawk absolutely listens to the log and listens to Margaret. She calls, says the log has a message, and he's like, this is important, I'm listening.
He knows this is serious business.
100%, yes.
Yeah.
Hawk absolutely knows that what Margaret says is so important. Have to listen to it.
Michael Horse is amazing as well. I mean, he brings such sincerity to that role. He was always a compassionate character, Hawk, and I love the way that Michael Horse brought that to the role.
Well, apart from when he's chucking a huge knife into a guy's back and straight up murdering him in Canada.
Good thing you guys can keep a secret. Never to be mentioned again.
Bobby killed the guy, so did Hawk, whatever.
Who hasn't in Twin Peaks?
Cop's gonna cop, am I right?
Exactamundo.
So her log tells Hawk that something is missing, and it has to do with Special Agent DoppelCooper, and you get the impression.
Now that's a name I've not heard in a long time.
I was so excited at this part because I thought, here is Hawk right on the edge at Glastonbury Grove. This is gonna happen. Cooper's gonna walk out. It's gonna happen, man. Psych. From David Lynch. But we do get to zoom in behind the red curtain, and we finally get to enter that red room for the first time in 25 years. I remember just being so blown away by this, and one of the things I was really thankful for is that there's like no bells and whistles in this scene at all. It's very, very sedate, and considering the last time we were in the Red Room, everything was very crazy.
Okay, you've jumped ahead of several scenes, because Margaret calls Hawk at the sheriff's station first, and then later she calls him again when he's in the woods.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, yeah.
Because before that, it goes back to Buckhorn, and that's when they arrest Bill Hastings,
Shaggy.
a.k.a. Shaggy, a.k.a. Matthew Lillard, the king of Dungeons and Dragons.
Look, D&D, you're doing, like, you're chasing heroic moments.
Yeah.
You're being brave. You're vanquishing evil.
First of all, gay. Second of all, stupid.
And we get his performance is amazing. I love when he's in the interrogation.
Yeah, shout out to Shaggy, Matthew Lillard. He is a real revelation in this role. He's so fucking good. Like, he gets 2 great interrogation scenes in this series, and this is the first one. I love some of the subtle work he does. Like when he just learns of Ruth's death, you really feel the shock in Matthew Lillard's performance. He just has that moment where he's doing that where the words don't quite form, and it's like the thoughts are not quite forming in his head. I really think it's an amazing performance. Give that guy an Emmy.
Yeah, I love the chat he has with his wife later, where they're in the prison cell together. She's like, I knew about the affair, and he's like, well, I knew about you and
That
George.
was pretty fucking early, man. Like, that was like kinda in the first 10 minutes, and it was good.
That's at the start of part 2 where that happens.
I don't know about you guys, but this all merges into one, because I watched the feature length 1 and 2 together rather than watching the separate episodes.
The demarcation point is when Mackley and the state cop, who's like the anti-Cooper in the sense that, oh, you just deal with it. They go to Bill Hastings' house and they open the boot, and that's where it ends.
And they find the blue velvet lump of flesh.
Yeah, woof. Well, let's just talk about all of that as a winner then and save us going back and forth. When they go to... Cause the first time they go and visit the house, there was something I wanted to mention here. It's something that I did not pick up on for ages, and I think it was not the rewatch I had with you, Alan, but maybe the rewatch I did after that. When they go to the Hastings house, behind the glass door, the front door, there is a framed picture on the wall, black and white portrait, of Franz Kafka. True story.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yes. And it's the first of 2 portraits of Franz Kafka that appear in The Return. The second one being in Gordon Cole's office. And Lynch is a huge Kafka fan, and I always feel like there's this subconscious thing going on at this point where Lynch is saying, you think you know that this is another murder investigation in the vein of the Palmer investigation from season 1. In fact, that's going to be frustrated. Any journey towards that is going to be frustrated, and you're going to have to go elsewhere, and all your questions are just going to lead to more questions, because that's kind of what Kafka was famous for as a storyteller.
And also every David Lynch thing ever, yes.
Yep.
The scene you mentioned, James, where Phyllis confronts Bill in the cell, what I love about that is particularly her performance that's so heightened in that soap opera way.
I was going to say it's pure soap opera. Yeah.
For a moment, you do feel you are 100% back in that era that gave us the original Twin Peaks. Life in prison, Bill. Life in prison. Nobody talks like that.
No. And then we get our first woodsman drop at that point, though, or just after that scene.
That's right, with the floaty head.
Yep.
And then that had so many people going, okay, who the fuck is this guy? And we all thought that individual was going to be important somehow, and not realising that he was just one of a massive squad. A posse, if you will, a young team of woodsmen.
Whole squad woodsmaning. Still can't find a light. But yeah, so then we get back to the Black Lodge drop you were talking about earlier. The curtains appear, we go into the Red Room, and Coop is sitting there with his FBI pen. I really need to find that video.
I noted the pen.
Yep.
We're back in the pen reality. For listeners who don't know what this is, in fact, we'll find that video and I'll link it in the show notes, because I think that guy does the best explanation of that theory. But there was many theories back in the day of Fire Walk With Me about the relevance or significance or not of the fact that Cooper is shown sometimes wearing his FBI pin in the Red Room and sometimes not. It is interesting he's shown here wearing it. By glossing over what I glossed over about the Sheriff's Department, I forgot to mention the fact that we're reintroduced to Lucy and Andy. We did see Lucy earlier, but we forget Andy back. And having Hawk, Lucy and Andy together, oh, it's so great. to see the three of them back in that conference room. All the fan feels.
The nice explanation of their kid having the same
I was
birthday.
going to say that. Thanks for that exposition, Lucy. We haven't seen Agent Cooper since before Wally was born, and Wally was 24, and he was born on the same day as Marlon Brando. Thank you, Lucy.
Coop is there with his pen. He's in the red room, and we get a beautiful Philip Gerard moment.
Yep. Mike the One-Armed Man, or Philip Gerard, whatever name he happens to be using right now.
Is it future?
Sure, or is it past? Okay, some notes about this.
Wait, I've got one note to say, and then I'm going to let you go off in one. When Laura says to Dale, "You can go out now," I would be fucking out of there in seconds. I wouldn't sit there and try and ask more questions. I'd be like, I'd have been out of that lodge.
Well, see.
I would be like a Looney Tunes cartoon and my legs spinning and says, "You can go out now." I'd be like, okay, bye.
So Mike appears and he says that, and then he disappears suddenly. And I feel like this is another instance of us not seeing things linearly. I feel like this is Mike saying to Cooper, remember when this happened. Mm-hmm. And so what we see next is something that's already happened. This meeting with Laura has already happened. I feel like it's a similar situation as what we discussed with the giant. So when Mike says, is it future, is it past? He's basically telling Cooper that they're one and the same, because basically this route you're on is entirely circular, because you're just continually doing the same thing over and over again. And I think when Laura comes in here, so many things to say about Laura's appearance here. So she asks Cooper if he recognises her. And at first he's a bit unsure, because obviously this is an older Laura Palmer, and there shouldn't be an older Laura Palmer for obvious reasons, unless you just subscribe to the theory that people age in the Black Lodge for some reason, and that's all there is to that. I think at some point I assumed that was the case. I think I've revised that now, though. I think what we're seeing here, this is a representation of the Laura that Cooper has created by his shenanigans with time travel.
Yeah.
And likewise the Leland that we see, who's older also. I think, despite what Mark Frost writes, spoiler for you, Alan, writes in the final dossier about Leland having killed himself around 1989, I'm just disregarding that. Because I prefer to think that this is a reflection of the Leland that could have existed had all of that stuff not happened.
Also, sorry, can we just take a moment here to say that Ray Wise has aged pretty well?
Oh, yeah, he definitely...
Yeah.
I mean, obviously he looks older, but he does not look 25 years older.
So these are new timeline Laura and new timeline Leland.
That's my feeling, yeah. And I feel like this is all these characters... I feel Laura is certainly converging with Mike here to say, don't do this. And another thing that makes me feel that now is the way she says to Cooper... when she repeats the old classic line of sometimes I feel like I know her but my arms bend back, I feel like this is the Carrie Page Laura saying, I don't have any relationship to that who I was because of what you did. And when she says my arms bend back, it makes me think of the arm, and it makes me think of her being forced back against her will kind of thing. So I feel like this is all a reference to what Cooper ends up doing. The other thing here, which I think is quite crucial, and which I noticed on my first viewing, and which always gave me a real chill down my spine, is when Cooper says, but Laura Palmer is dead. And Laura replies, I am dead, and yet I live. And there's something in the way she says that second part that's quite aggressive.
Yes.
Which makes me think, hey, dickhead, yet I live because you fucked up. I feel like there's something really kind of accusatory in it, and I was definitely at the forefront of my mind when I was watching it this time.
Yes.
So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this, and I feel like this conversation has happened before, and I feel like the way we see Mike appear and disappear, and we see him come back again in that same chair.
And say the same thing.
Yes, and I feel like that's just a continuation of what we saw, and what we saw in between was him trying to remind Cooper, this is what happened.
Yeah. Look at how your actions made Laura fly out the roof.
Right, and that's the other crucial thing. When Laura disappears from the Red Room, the scream and the sound effect is exactly the same scream and sound effect that happens when she disappears in the woods at the end of episode 17. So that's where I'm at with that.
My point was, even in the memory of when it's like, you could go out now, if I was in the Red Room and someone said, you can go out now, they wouldn't even finish this sentence before I was out of there.
Well, you know, it's Stockholm Syndrome, isn't it? Which you've been there.
I mean, we know for a fact the coffee's terrible.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Some shit. Yeah.
That treacly shit. No give me the gourmet shit, as Quentin Tarantino would say.
I buy the gourmet expensive stuff because when I drink it, I want to taste it.
With a side order of toes.
Mike takes him to go and meet what I've referred to here as the non-toxic arm.
Or I've referred to as Fernanda Lira.
Fernanda Lira, yes.
The way the evolution of the arm speaks, it has exactly the same voice as crypto vocalist Fernanda Lira. How do we all enjoy the evolution of the arm? Because it's one of my favourite things.
I fucking love the evolution of the arm. Because the evolution of the arm is metal as fuck.
Yeah, Alan has thrown up devil horns for a people who can't see.
I love David Lynch's approach to recasting. It's like, because he's obviously not going to use Michael J. Anderson.
For people who don't know the background, Michael J. Anderson, we won't go into details, but he went off the rails a wee bit, and he made it quite clear but he would not be working with David Lynch again by a series of what I can only describe as quite unhinged posts on social media. So that was definitely not going to happen. He was never going to be coming back. So David Lynch, faced with that, how do I recast this character? I know, an electric tree with a chewing gum brain.
Which is something he's done before. Not in film, but I can't remember if it's a painting or a sculpture, but he created that thing before in some art form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely fits. I mean, in that way that writers only have one book, Lynch sort of only has one film, and he's been skirting around the same bunch of ideas since he first started, you know. And all of this stuff is very Ronnie Rocket to me. Mm-hmm. I feel like it fits in that universe. For people who don't know what Ronnie Rocket is, it was an unproduced script written by David Lynch that he tried to get made for years and then ended up getting shelved. The plot synopsis of it is absolutely bananas, so I'm not going to get into detail.
The full script is available online to download.
It is, yeah.
And it is absolutely bananas.
But it involves a lot of electricity, and this kind of imagery I feel is like right at home in that universe.
But the other thing, obviously the other casting point we'll come to later in the series is Philip Jeffries, because
right,
Lynch couldn't get David Bowie.
For obvious reasons.
I don't know if Lynch knew why Bowie couldn't do it.
Yeah, no, I think the way I've heard it told is Bowie's people came back said David won't be able to do this, and that was that. He wasn't given a proper reason why, but then obviously, like, literally I think 2 months later it became clear why.
Mm-hmm. So he's like, I guess if we just have a big coffee pot
that spews out smoke messages like the caterpillar from Alice in Wonderland, sure, why not?
Fernanda Lira gives him some lays out what he needs to do. It's like, look, do you remember your doppelganger? Well, he has to come back in before you can go out, so tree shrug, electricity crackles.
Yeah, basically. Now, I have some further thoughts on that, incidentally, spinning off from what I just was talking about earlier about the situation with Laura.
What were your thoughts?
We see that, though. We see that he doesn't go out until the doppelganger is back.
When Fernanda Lira says, he must come back in so you can go out, I think the you in question is the unified both of them rather than just the good Cooper. I feel like that's very consciously what the arm is saying.
Yeah.
Whereas when I first watched it, I just thought it meant good Cooper can only get out if the bad guy comes back. Whereas I really feel now that the arm is saying you have to be unified for this to work. Basically, Cooper has to accept his darkness one way or the other.
Yes.
And I think I touched on this in our previous episode, James, that Cooper is always kind of an idealized character in the original show. He becomes real to us just because we get so affectionate in a relationship with him. But when you really stand back, there's no way this guy could exist in the real world, as we said. There's no way that guy would be employed by the FBI. You know what I mean? He would need to have some other side. When you start to view DoppelCooper as being the repressed id of Cooper, things start to make a whole lot more sense. Funnily enough, I was listening to a podcast recently in which one of the guests they had on it had never seen Twin Peaks before, and they've just finished the first season. And one of their takes they've come away from it is saying, I really don't trust Cooper, which is not a take I ever had back when I was watching the show for the first time. But I think because TV has become a very different beast now, anti-heroes are a thing now, you know, and there are rooms for way more greyness in the way in which we perceive our protagonists on television. This person is like, I don't trust this guy. He's far too good. He's far too nice. There's got to be some darkness. And the other two on the podcast who've both seen The Return were both like, some things we could say about that, but we're just going to leave it for now.
And then we get one of the most vital scenes, I think, in The Return, which is DoppelCooper squishing Jack's face up.
I legitimately love this scene, and to me this is one of the kind of things that Lynch does best, which is a lot of stuff gets described as dreamlike in culture, but nobody does dreamlike like David Lynch, and this is literally like something I've seen in a dream. This is something I feel like I've done in a dream, like just somebody touched somebody in a weird way and a strange thing has happened, and it's something that doesn't happen in real life, and it's fine to have it happen in a real world context where you're dealing with a metaphysical character, you know, then you just accept it, but it's so fucking weird. What other filmmaker on earth would put this on screen? You know what I mean? Without some kind of explanation.
And it's not like it's a quick aside. It goes on for
No, it goes on for like a full minute of just stroking Jack's face and him just standing there like a statue. Yeah, it's so deeply fucking weird. It's fantastic.
I feel like Jack knows what's up, though. I think Jack knows that he's done for at that point.
Yeah, I think he's accepted his fate. He's had his 3 dinners. He's happy. Doesn't get any better than this. 3 dinners? Jesus, that's it. I feel like I've been around the world.
Oh god, do you think that DoppelCooper bought him those 3 dinners as like well, this is the end of the line for you?
I'll buy you 3 dinners if you die.
Yeah, here's your reward for service. Have your 3 dinners.
Speaking of dinners, that was a note I wanted to make, by the way. When they're all having their dinner in the diner and Cooper is pressing Ray for the information from Hastings' secretary that for some reason only Ray can seem to retrieve. I don't know why Cooper can't just go and visit her himself, but whatever.
Hey, let's not overthink this opportunity.
Exactly, yeah. And we get that great line from Cooper, the immortal line, want. I don't need anything, Ray. I want. Which, of course, is a fabulous callback to that line he has in season 1, regards Audrey, where he says, what I want and what I need are 2 different things. Which I always think is so sinister now when I watch that scene from the first season now.
Yes.
There is that DoppelCooper in the back of his mind going,
I don't need that. No. I want that. Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, the note I wanted to make, while that whole scene is unfolding, if you look at Cooper's plate, he's definitely been eating plenty of corn.
Garmin Bosia,
guys.
Yes.
So he was getting his stomach full of pain and sorrow, just enough to say, all right, Jack, you've had your 3 dinners. Your tea's up, literally.
He needs to be careful, though, because that stuff can come back on you if you're not careful.
Yeah, he needs to watch how he drives.
And then we get poor Daria.
Yeah, Daria's next to get it. Na 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 na. She's about to find out it really is a sick, sad world.
I've got to be direct. You're gripping on my neck.
Oh, poor Daria.
Her attempts at subterfuge are so bad, though, which
they are not good.
Prompts me to ask the question: Daria having a laugh?
Hey. So this again is a classic Lynch scene of having a woman in her underwear be murdered and then have her body displayed as an artistic tableau afterwards.
Yes.
Which I have some problems with, but at the same time I'm like, Lynch gonna Lynch, I guess.
We spoke about this in the last episode. He's so detached from what a lot of people would consider to be problematic or not, because he's living that quote-unquote art life that you're like,
art life.
Fair enough. There's an interview I saw with him once where he was talking about his 2 favourite things, he literally said, are, I like industrial spaces and nude women.
Yeah, that's fair. He lays it all on the table, or in this case on the bedspread. This is such a disturbing scene, and as much as Daria herself must be a shady character, I do feel really sorry for her in this scene. I feel like Nicola Liberty does a great job of conveying the terror you feel when you know you're about to be killed.
Yep.
Just that hopelessness and that whine she does after he punches her in the face. It's horrendous. I was already terrified of DoppelCooper before this scene, but this is the scene where I'm like, okay, we are not in Twin Peaks anymore.
Yeah.
This is not the Twin Peaks we knew.
It's a different scene. Absolutely, yes.
So he gets the truth out of her by unveiling what they call I'm going to shout them out again, on the Talking Backwards podcast, this is what they always refer to as BLT, which is Black Lodge Tech.
I've got it written down here as DoppelCooper's sonic screwdriver.
Yeah, this dictaphone that seems to have surreal properties. I don't know how he recorded this phone call. I guess there isn't a how. We just have to accept this is what his dictaphone does. He has a Diane from hell.
Let's not overthink this opportunity. Yeah, we find out that Ray and her are conspiring with Philip Jeffries to kill him.
Yes. Ostensibly with Philip Jeffries, yeah. I still don't, even after having seen The Return in its entirety several times, I still don't quite get the logistics of how all this works. Or if indeed they even were hired by Philip Jeffries.
It's not Philip Jeffries on the line when he's talking. That is definitely 100% not Philip Jeffries.
Let's get to... I have some thoughts on that. Okay, let's just wrap up the Daria thing. So she has that grisly fucking death.
He shows her his pure shite drawing of Judy.
Let's not talk about Judy. Let's not talk about Judy.
I've just written it down as the Jude of Spades. And I remember at the time when we first watched this, I asked you, James, on one of our sojourns to the Tron, was that just a shite version of the owl cave symbol? Can he just not draw? And part of me is like, I still don't know for certain. I mean, certainly it looks like Judy's head, or the mother's head that we later see. But could it just be a shite, like a wooden-handed child did what they thought was their impression of the owl cave symbol?
I think so. Either way, it's a nice visual, but it's just a really bad drawing. And I was fucking in tears watching it. It's got shite drawing, Coop.
It's also a beautifully Lynchian moment that he unveils it as a what's supposed to be a dramatic moment, but it's so comically bad that part of me wants to laugh. Like, I wouldn't blame Daria if she laughed. Thanks for giving me that one last laugh before you kill me.
I'm sorry I made fun of your drawing.
So after Daria is dead, Cooper then gets out what I'm calling the Wyndham Earl laptop.
Yep.
This is 100% the same model of computer that Wyndham Earl inexplicably used in that makeshift log cabin where he was accessing whatever branch of Tam Shepard's it was in Twin Peaks to get all those elaborate disguises.
Joke shop.
He's on the same Federal Bureau of Internet.
Oh, this scene is amazing. Do you know what I love about this? This is exactly the kind of pish you used to see in movies all the time that involved anything to do with computers. And it was like a filmmaker who had no idea how computers worked. This is the kind of thing they would show you. Go, yeah, that's how computers work. And it's the kind of thing that I could almost hear Romero from Mr. Robot in the back of my head during the scene going, oh, it's fucking filmmaker bullshit. I've been in this game 27 years. I ain't never seen some Black Lodge tech that works like this.
Take a drink.
Oh, he flipped it like Missy Elliott.
Before he breaks out the crap top, he gets his weird phone thing.
His Auntie Diane.
And makes it...
His Auntie Diane? Yeah. Hi, Auntie Diane, how are you? Just hear your old phone, my Auntie Diane.
But he makes a call to what he believes to be Philip Jeffries.
Right. Now, we had such a feast on this, James, when it first aired. I remember you and I were obsessed with what this phone call meant. Mm-hmm. And even now, I'm still obsessed because there's still so much I don't know.
He phones his Auntie Diane.
This person on the other end of the line is definitely not Philip Jeffries.
No.
Because it's not... We don't have the quote-unquote southern accent. The voice, even though distorted, is definitely not that actor who's doing the Bowie in this season.
Nope.
It's someone else. Now, I remember a couple of years ago I went onto Reddit, and somebody on Reddit said they had stripped away some of the distortion, and they said to them it sounded like Grace Zabriskie's voice. I don't know that I believe that, but certainly the idea that it's Sarah Palmer kind of works on some level. Because the character does literally say, you're going back in the lodge tomorrow and I will be with Bob again.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense that it's Sarah Palmer.
It does. I don't know. Because this is Twin Peaks The Return and there's so many ways to interpret everything, I know for sure that makes sense, but there's still a part of me, like, because it's not been 100% confirmed, this part of me is like, but what if it's somebody else? Who could it be?
Also...
and there's that...
Whoever it is, I think he's trying to phone. However, he's going to phone Philip Jeffries, right? He's trying to do that,
right?
And whoever it is intercepts that call and calls him because she says, "I just called to say
I love you."
It's Stevie Wonder. Yeah, Stevie Wonder wants to be with Bob again. But so I think whoever it is, if it's Sarah Palmer, if it's the Shishu who we're not going to talk about, they basically sort of like cut into whatever call he's trying to make to Jeffries. And it's just like, get back in the Black Lodge, M9.
Yeah. M9. Yeah, I mean, that definitely all tracks. There's no doubt about that. But I just like the idea there could be another mystery box inside this mystery box. But for sure, the Sarah Palmer stuff works.
Another thing that I thought that doesn't really pan out but purely because of the name, is he's like Philip, and I was like, what if it's Philip Gerard? What if it's Mike?
Oh, yeah, it doesn't pan out because we do get when he does meet Philip Jeffries at the Dutchman's later, he does reference this phone call, so it can't be Philip Gerard. But I think early in the I think that was something we probably both theorised. Is it Philip Jeffries? Is it Philip Gerard?
Is it Philip Schofield? He cranks up the crap top, and he gets the location of Buckhorn, and he gets the location of the prison that Ray is supposedly in. But also on that map, Craig, I don't know if you spotted what other feature is on the map.
What's that?
Sioux Falls.
Oh, that's right, from Fargo.
Yeah.
Take a drink.
Sioux Falls is pinned on that shit. That's why I was like, oh yeah. We're not going to talk about Fargo. In fact, we're not going to mention Fargo at all. We'll get to Fargo in a minute, guys.
Call back.
Then he goes next door and just hangs out with Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Oh god, and he has the most gross line, I think maybe the entirety of the series. And with the delivery, and again, this was a real further hammer to that nail of those memories of your old Twin Peaks. You can forget that shit, because here's your Kyle MacLachlan, the guy you know is squeaky clean Cooper, telling Jennifer Jason Leigh that she's nice and wet. I didn't need this.
That's what I say anytime I touch a dog's nose.
The fact that Chantel is presented as such a slob as well, like the room is just full of discarded empty Cheetos bags. Yeah. It's like, God.
I will watch Jennifer Jason Leigh read the fucking phone book by, I think she's amazing.
She's great. She's fantastic.
Yeah. Abso-fucking-tively. Yes.
Yeah, and I was so thrilled that she was in this. The fact she turned up so early, I was like, yes. Yeah, so that all happens, and that's a raid. And then we go back to the Red Room.
Meanwhile.
So once again, I feel like this is an instance where we go right back to Cooper where he was standing where we last saw him. And it's like all of that we've just seen with DoppelCooper is almost as if the arm has said, presented that to him. As if to say, here, let me remind you, this happened. Also, the way that Cooper is framed in that scene is exactly the same headshot that we get superimposed over the sheriff's office scene in episode 17, where he says, "We live inside a dream." Which makes me think all the timey-wimey wibbly-wobbly of it all, the entirety of Twin Peaks: The Return is taking place in this moment. That's my hot take.
I think Twin Peaks: The Return has big Mulholland Drive energy in its structure. I think it's, if you look at the 18 hours of The Return as being structured exactly like Mulholland Drive, then everything you're seeing is kind of this... Oh, it's not exactly like it now, I can't think of it.
But I know where you're going with this. It doesn't exactly sync up. I know where you're going.
Yeah, like at the start, or in the lodge, and everyone's telling Dale Cooper, look, remember what happened last time you tried this? You fucked up. You're on a Coop Loop. And then...
A Coop Loop, yeah. Okay, that's a phrase that's going to come back. We're going to use that from now on. The Coop Loop, that's how we're referring to this theory.
And he stands there and goes, oh, and you're right. He sees this whole thing happen in that instant, and then fucks off out to do his business again.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's thematically appropriate to the same way that the protagonists of other Lynch movies that we've referenced here have a way of making themselves forget what they don't want to remember. And I feel like Cooper's just doing the same thing. He's doing what Fred Madison did in Lost Highway.
He's pulled a Pullman.
I prefer to remember things my own way. You know? So he's just sort of forgot that this was a disaster, and he thinks to himself somewhere in his subconscious, maybe if I just do it again, it'll be different, you know? And everyone in the Red Room at this point is saying to him, no, man, gonna stop doing this. And I think it's further illustrated by the fact that you notice there's these scenes here where we see that the doorways in the Red Room no longer work. Like, one of them doesn't admit him.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you can't go there anymore. We're calling an end to this. You'll have to find some other way. And then there's like one that doesn't even have a door. Remember, like he just has that one where he looks strangely at the curtain, and then he just disappears through it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like almost as if there's holes in the Red Room itself now that he's caused, kind of thing, like a kind of chain reaction. Like there's dimensions within dimensions. #aliens.
I kind of love that Coop's character does that though. Like, son, these red rooms have existed for like infinity without anyone fucking things up.
Right,
you turn up and suddenly it all goes to shit over the course of 25 years. Thanks.
Some blonde white
Yes.
girl gets murdered
Yes.
in 1989 and suddenly you're playing God. It's like,
It
Jesus.
does not fucking matter. Yeah.
So, the arm, Mike recognises that something is wrong by telling us succinctly, something's wrong. And we notice that Cooper and Mike have become separated at this point for reasons that we can't, because they were together as they walked through the curtain, and then he seemed to get separated, which I think is more of the timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly. Cooper has walked through holes that Mike hasn't walked through, because Mike is still in the same place when we see him next. He's still standing next to Fernanda Lira.
And Fernanda tells us, it's my doppelganger.
My doppelganger. So I feel like Cooper has sort of made the kind of malign elements in the Red Room even stronger. That's kind of the impression I'm getting. And it ultimately just helped DoppelCooper.
Because it is in their house now.
Right, yeah. I feel that's all tracks.
Yeah.
That's all tracks. We're getting there. We've solved it. I said we don't need to watch the rest. We're done.
Back to Mr. Robot. Alan, do you like Mr. Robot?
Fuck yeah.
So, Fernanda Lira, the doppelganger, leaps out upon Cooper, gives it non-existent, and that's when we get Funhouse Red Room floor, which is a thing before this happened I did not know I wanted.
No, but it's everything. Like the chevrons are banging up and down.
They do chevron run, they do chevron.
More like chevron.
It's the chevron.
Chevron.
Why is there not a Twin Peaks theme park, and why can we not ride this?
Major Briggs' character in Stargate SG-1 would be really pissed off at this because the chevrons are not locked in. There's a Stargate SG-1 joke that a small percentage of our listening audience might understand.
Well, it's the obscure demographics that are absolutely our wheelhouse. So Cooper gets dropped into non-existence, into this, what I can only describe as the most lo-fi student filmmaking version of outer space I have ever seen. And I am 100% here for it. Just shake that camera, no one will ever know, nothing's moving. I absolutely love this scene. I love the sound design on it. Just all the kind of mad pneumatic kind of drones as Cooper is whooshing through this space between dimensions. I cannot get enough of this. And the first time I saw it, this thrilled me no end. I was like, okay, I have no idea where the fuck this is going, but this is incredible. And then, of course, there is the brief interval where he drops into the box. And this is like what feels like the third fake out by this point, because I'm like, oh, he's going to come out and meet Hawk. Oh, no, he's not. Oh, he's going to fall out and he'll be in the real world. Oh, no, he's in space. Oh, no, he's in the box now. Maybe he'll come out and he'll meet Sam. Oh, no, he's back in space. Yep. It's like, fuck you, Lynch.
I love the visual effect of the box going chung, 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 like the photographic thing. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
I have this headcanon where some of the producers, maybe some of the people at Showtime, you know, when David Lynch is like, we're going to do this next, they're like, so we've got all these CGI guys, they've got this big budget for CGI, and he's like, CG what? I'm going to take photos of things and make them smaller. I'm going to shake this camera around.
Lynch has always been a master of lo-fi effects, and even when he uses CGI, it's used in a very lo-fi way, you know. Actually, that's something that's true across this whole series. When he does use the CGI, it's used very particularly for the most otherworldly moments, so he doesn't particularly care that it looks cheap, because you've never been to an alternate metaphysical dimension, you don't know how things look. They might look like cartoons. Why not? Before we move on to the final couple of scenes here, I've realised we did not mention Duncan Todd, played by our old pal Patrick Fleischer from Mulholland Drive, Lynch fans.
He does not want to look behind a dumpster.
He does not. No. And just like in Mulholland Drive, where there's a guy who's doing all of it, Duncan Todd seems to be in league with someone bad. Now, of course, we later learn it is Mr. C, and as we discussed earlier, it is Mr. C who is in charge of the glass box, and so that's the connection between these things. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I just think it's an interesting note to make that early in that scene in part one where Duncan Todd calls in his assistant, Roger, who, by the way, Roger always reminds me of a kind of lower rent version of the guy who played Iron Fist.
Oh shit, yeah, he really does look like him.
Just not with the physique. More like Iron Deficiency Fist. I don't mean to rag on that guy. I mean, he's got an average build for a man his age. I've sat here fucking bloating over the past year with lockdowns. I'm in no fucking position to slag off anybody's physique.
Plus, he's in a far superior TV show to the guy that played Iron Fist.
This is also true, yeah.
You know, he's winning on all fronts.
Yeah. So Duncan Todd calls through Roger. He tells Roger, just make sure you don't get involved with somebody like him. And it does become clear that they're talking about Mr. C. But the reason I bring this up is because he says to Roger, tell her she's got the job. And I know there was a lot of Reddit chat of people wondering whether this was about Tracy. Is Duncan Todd giving Tracy the job to go and seduce Sam at that exact moment that has been arranged for the security guard to be away, so that they can basically perform the sex ritual unwittingly in Sam's case? It's a nice idea, but I think it doesn't really make much sense, because why would you recruit somebody in Las Vegas to go to New York? I think it's more likely to be Lorraine, who is the wrangler of the two hoods that are trying to kill Dougie.
Yeah.
I feel like that makes more sense. But again, we don't know. We're never told. It could be something entirely fucking unrelated. But given that this is the moment where Roger says, why do you let him make you do these things? It does make sense that it's related to Mr. C. So yeah, I do enjoy Patrick Fleischer. He's got a good on-screen presence. It was quite fun seeing him pop up and going, oh, it's the Winkies guy.
He always looks so terrified as well.
He does. He's got one of those faces that if you want him to emote fear, you're not going to get many people who do it better.
Yep, he's your guy.
So yeah, after all of that, all the cosmic shit with Cooper, good news. We're going home. We're going back to Twin Peaks.
Back to the house. Back to the Palmer house.
Back to in our house now. Yeah, it's wholesome family time. Oh no, wait. Sarah Palmer, she has no family. Oh wait, she's partly been by herself this whole time in a darkened room, smoking and drinking herself to death whilst watching what I can only describe as the most horrendous looking animal documentaries. A bunch of lionesses going to town on a wildebeest, or a water buffalo, I think it actually is.
Putting the graphic into National Geographic.
Oh, this guy. It's definitely not all well in the world of Sarah Palmer. That's what this vignette is telling us.
Yep, it's not sunshine and lollipops in the Palmer house. Who'd have thunk that someone whose husband repeatedly sexually abused and then murdered her daughter and then died would not be having a good time later in life?
Who'd have thunk? I mean, I will say, when I first saw this, again, it's one of those things that Lynch does really well. Just a very simple, I think it's like 2 or 3 shots in this scene, and it is literally just someone watching telly. But the way that set is put together, and Grace Zabrisky's performance, we can never say enough good words about Grace Zabrisky, it really drives home to you just how much time has passed, how much of that time has been characterised by absolute despair. And of course, once you've seen the entirety of The Return, there's also the added element of, oh, there is actually something sinister living inside her that is presumably been there the whole time. And I say presumably because it's only definitely so if you subscribe to the notion that Mark Frost books are canon, which to echo Mel's on the Damn Fine TV podcast, if Mark Frost books aren't canon, as David Lynch seems to believe, then David Lynch's weather reports aren't canon. How about that? So yeah, that's a hell of a powerful scene with, it's a great example of that filmmaker and the actor just doing very little really, but just doing it so well. Taking
at face value as well, it is just like, if you had to stamp the pure grief and despair that Sarah Palmer's been living in since Twin Peaks finished, you're like, oh, there it is. But also, in the last episode of season 2, the last time we see Sarah Palmer is in the Double R Diner, being sort of shepherded in by Dr. Jacoby.
Yeah, in his Mandrake the Magician costume.
Yeah, where she just rocks out that, like...
I'm waiting for you.
That scene screams there's something fucking inside her.
Yeah, I think this is sort of
something
the beauty.
Inside so strong.
No, there's a needle drop.
It's gonna have to go in the playlist, I'm afraid.
Oh god. Yeah, and that's part of it. It's similar to what I was saying earlier about the mistaken impression I had for over 25 years that there was not actually 2 physical Coopers. I had the same sort of impression with that element of the finale where we get that Grace Zabriskie cameo, because I always just assumed, well, this is just another way of Lynch showing us that we always knew that Sarah Palmer was, in Donna Hayward's words, a bit spooky. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense that at a time where everything's getting a bit apocalyptic in that finale, that she would be very attuned to this. And so I just took it that that's what that was about, that forces were kind of speaking through her. Now I kind of think, was there always this idea that Sarah had something sinister? who knows? I mean, we don't know what conversations went on behind the scenes. And Lynch quite often will, the best he will ever say in an admission or refusal of this one way or the other is that he will come up with things not consciously knowing what the idea is and only later realising what it is.
And then we stay in Twin Peaks.
Oh, they're treating us here, spoiling us, man.
2 scenes in a row.
Holy shit. So I wet my pants the first time I saw the Roadhouse sign reflected in this puddle. I was like, oh man.
And then I'll bet you were immediately disappointed when chromatics were playing.
Well, to be honest, this is sort of what I expected.
To be honest, sorry, I'm just putting my money... Putting my money out there, putting my hat on the table, putting my money in the ring, whatever.
I'll put your money in your hat and I will nick that thing.
I really love this chromatics song, so...
I prefer it when it was called Wish Fulfillment by Sonic Youth.
I see your wishes on the wall.
I'm surprised Lee Ronaldo has not sued. I don't dislike this song, and I think I will lay my hat on the table, since that's a phrase we're apparently using. I don't particularly like most of the acts at the Roadhouse in this entire season. Most of them do not do much for me. But I think the majority of them work in the context of Twin Peaks, and that's what's important. I think,
except for maybe Hudson Mohawk.
There are, well, you preempted me. There are exceptions, but I did say most. Most of them work in the context of what Lynch is doing here. I think there's a few that stand out for the wrong reasons. I think the Hudson Mohawk one is a strange one. I don't really know why that's in there.
Do you know what I think is weird about Hudson Mohawk playing at the Bang Bang Bar at the Roadhouse? Is that he's from the same place we are. Mm-hmm. We've seen, I don't know if you've ever seen Hudson Mohawk, but he was coming up in Glasgow when we were kind of in that music scene around that time. So he's just a guy that's been from the Glasgow music scene when we were younger, and seeing him in Twin Peaks kind of yoinks the rug away a little. You're like, oh, it's fucking Hudson Mohawk.
It does, yeah, but it sort of adds to that sensation that the finale does, where it feels like it's ripping Twin Peaks into the real world that I sort of referenced earlier. But it adds that extra dimension for us, certainly. Yeah, I mean, on the subject of the music, we probably will talk about this intermittently as we're talking about the episodes in future. Some of the acts I don't mind. Chromatics, I don't mind. I can see how they work as the modern day Julie Cruise. I can sort of get that. The only thing that's really missing for me is what the Julie Cruise stuff has is that really weird throwback element to kind of that hint of jazz and that hint of early rock and roll that sort of gave it that timeless quality. And you could argue that the Chromatics music does call back to music from 30 years ago, and so therefore that's why it kind of works. I feel like the Chromatics sounds very ordinary to my ear in a way that the Julie Cruise stuff never does. And I feel that way about a lot of the acts on this. I mean, I would never listen to any of this stuff outside of the show, I'll be honest. I know there are people who love the soundtrack album and really dig into it. I've never listened to it. I'm never going to. I don't enjoy these acts enough that I'm going to do that. Just not my thing. Chromatics, by far, are not the worst. I think they're fine. The worst for me is Au revoir Simone, who I think are the most anemic excuse for a musical act I've ever seen or heard. Just so lifeless, just so bland. I don't know why they're in Twin Peaks. I mean, other than them being ethereal synth pop, I don't see what relevance or relation they have to the aesthetic of Twin Peaks at all. And what particularly pisses me off about them in the show is that not only do they appear twice, but the second time they appear is in the scene with Sky Ferreira, and I'm like, Sky was right there, Dave. And you let Au revoir Simone perform twice? Unforgivable.
Sky would have been on stage, but she had to stay off to scratch her manky pits.
Yeah, just long enough for Mudson Hohawk to dismantle all his gear and for Au revoir Simone to set up and do the sound check.
Yeah, the in-house crew at Roadhouse are obviously like top of their game.
Yeah, they're doing that same drug that Laura Palmer must have been doing back in the day to do the Meals on Wheels and be the prom queen and teach Josie English and be pretty much every other errand that was needed done in the town.
That drug, Craig, is called cocaine.
Well, now it's called Sparkle, apparently.
Oh, yeah. Also, don't get why would the Nine Inch Nails be playing in the Roadhouse?
I like how we are now just referring to them as the Nine Inch Nails.
They're a pretty huge band. If they're going to do one gig in Washington State and it's Seattle, their US tour is not going to have more than one gig in Washington State.
I think that is the second biggest mystery in the entirety of the Twin Peaks franchise, is how exactly all these acts are finding their way to this backwater burg to perform in this dive bar. I don't know how exactly that's happening. The biggest mystery I will come to in just a moment.
Right. But if that's the case, then why was Ted Raimi's band not playing at the Roadhouse?
Maybe they were meant to, and they just they took a detour. That's why they ended up getting poor Ted ended up getting papier mâché pond or pwned.
So biggest
well,
mystery.
Let's get into it. Okay, let's talk about how we were feeling. I was ecstatic during this scene. Whatever minor misgivings I had about the chromatics aside, like I say, I accepted that as part of what Lynch was doing. That was fine. Just being back in that place was so exciting.
Yeah.
And just getting our first glimpse of Shelley hanging out with her girlfriends.
Heart
I love
only.
the vibe of that. Just the instant good, warm vibes that gave me. I was like, oh, this is great.
Yeah, because the first time the camera pans over them, there's no dialogue or anything. They're just doing shots at a table, and you're like, it's Shelley. Oh, my heart. And
Shelley
you're
out
right.
at girls' night.
It's like coming back to a place you've not been in for like 25 years and just being like, they've not changed it. It's beautiful. And then in comes James Hurley and Cockney Rebel.
And we all were wondering why Cockney Rebel was wearing only one glove. Probably just one of those throwaway details that will not pay off down the line. But I remember at the time, the first time he spoke, James offers him a beer. What kind of beer do you like? And he says, I'll have whatever. And James says, cool place, huh? And Freddie says, it's the dog's bollocks, isn't it? I'm like, okay, this is David Lynch's idea of what a British person sounds like. I see. And Jake Wardell, I know, is actually English, but I've heard him speak in real life, and though he is from London, his accent is definitely not that exaggerated. Did you ever hear the story of how he got cast?
I've not, no.
David Lynch apparently just randomly encountered his videos on YouTube on which Jake Wardell was just doing different accents, and apparently David Lynch thought that was the most hilarious thing he'd ever seen. And I love the idea that Arte Auteur David Lynch, his idea of peak comedy is just some random English guy doing accents, and David Lynch going, I love this guy, I need him on my TV show, find this guy. I make David Lynch sound way more New York than Midwestern.
Hey, I'm David Lynch, I'm walking here.
My attitude to American accents is the same one Jake Wardell has to every accent. So that was, I'm not going to lie, I was thrilled to see James when he walked in and looking all rough. And that's not, I don't mean it as a slight against James Marshall, but let's be honest, he's visibly aged. And he's got the biker jacket on and all that. And there's just something about the way he conducts himself and the way his wardrobe is put together and whatnot. You feel like there's a history there. It's another piece of this show where it really drives home just how much time has passed. And even before Shelley says to her girlfriends that James was in a motorcycle accident, he's just quiet now. I was kind of already thinking, just looking at James, that I wonder what's happened to him in the intervening years. Probably something tragic.
Yeah. And
then Shelley just pretty much instantly confirms it. And of course, it's classic James. He's still swooning from afar over some mysterious brunette. I love all that shit. I think in the context of the 21st century, some of this behaviour on James's part, we're ready to call it out as being a bit creepy. Whereas back in the original series, at the time, these were just accepted tropes kind of thing, and it wasn't until later you started to analyse it and go, yeah, not cool, James. And here it's deliberately sort of called out because you see that Renee's girlfriends are around, or at least one of them is saying, something wrong with that guy.
To which Shelley responds, no, James is cool. James has always been cool.
And so the single greatest mystery in the entirety of the Twin Peaks franchise is how Madchen Amick delivered that line with a straight face.
Do you think that Mark Frost or David Lynch wrote that line in particular? And when they wrote it, do you think that it was a deliberate two fingers up to the fandom?
I think yes on both of those things, and I think for David Lynch particularly, James is cool. I think David Lynch is invested in the idea of James as an archetype. I think he's actually very romantic about that idea of the good boy who's got a bit of it, just enough of a dangerous side. I think the only reason it falls down with James is because, and again, I don't want to shade James Marshall too much, but he's not the best actor. And when you look at the original series, there are things I think the script is trying to do. It's trying to write checks that James Marshall's acting chops can't cash, unfortunately. And so I think because of that, they end up tailoring the script a bit more in the later episodes, and the character just becomes a bit more bland, which I think is a pity. I'm sure James Marshall is a nice guy, and I always feel bad when people really pillory James Marshall online. I'm like, leave the guy alone, for fuck's sake. He's just an actor trying to do a job. Leave him alone. But I think, there are legitimate shortcomings there that, that character could have been a bit better if the performance had been a bit better. But I'm not going to stick the knife into James Marshall. I think he's had enough. Leave him alone, guys. But I think legitimately David Lynch was saying here, my idea of cool is this character. If you don't like it, tough.
I love the delivery of that line, though.
Yeah, it's great. It's so sincere. It's said with 100% sincerity. And we know that how David Lynch feels about Madchen Amick, and we know how he feels about Shelley. Like, that's one of his favourite special characters. And we could talk about how that might be problematic in some ways. But I feel like anything that comes out of Shelley's mouth in this kind of regard, we have to treat with sincerity,
It's canon. James has always been
absolutely
cool.
canon, yeah. In the universe of Twin Peaks, I think David Lynch legitimately regards James as cool. And he wants us to know about it.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, across the bar, there's another version of cool. Cool and dangerous.
Mad Red.
Crazy Red, who's going to have one of the show-stealing moments later in a few episodes' time.
Yep.
Balthazar Getty, legitimately for the first time for me, I realised that, he actually looks like a good-looking guy. Whereas when he was younger, I never really particularly thought he was.
Well, when he's in Lost Highway, he's done up like a sort of new metal goth a bit,
He's aged well. I think he's grown into his looks a lot more. And I said this to you, so we will talk about it when we get to the episode in question. But when we get to spend that moment with Red with Richard Horn, man, that performance is so fucking good.
Yeah.
Balthazar Getty does way more acting in that one scene than he does in the entirety of Lost Highway.
He's got kind of manic Charlie Sheen energy.
Oh, yes. Winning, 100%. Yeah. But he gives Shelley the finger guns from across the room. And it's funny, in this moment, I thought he just looked a bit goofy. And it's not until we see him again that, oh no, this guy is fucking dangerous.
Yeah.
But at this moment, I was thinking to myself, I can see why she likes him. He's got a bit of the Bobby Briggs thing going on. Which at this point in our mind, that was a question. Like, whatever happened between Shelley and Bobby? That'll be answered in a couple of episodes' time or so. So yeah, this was a whole vibe, this scene. And I loved every moment of it. Also, eagle-eyed viewers will pick out what looks like Jacques Renault at the bar. Is in fact Jean-Michel Renault, another Renault cousin or brother. How many are there? And does he have the Pepe Le Pew accent? That's what I need to know.
He just can't keep those Renaults down.
Candy's dandy, yeah.
Twin Peaks has a quota that they need to fill of Renaults, and if they keep dying and stuff, like, right, import another couple from Canada.
Yeah. But it's cool that Lynch and Frost decided to bring him back. I think that's quite sweet to do that. Because I remember mentioning on a couple of episodes ago, James, where we mentioned that the actor had passed away. And I knew at the time before the return came back that he was having a lot of problems health-wise and paying his medical insurance and whatnot. So it was kind of cool that they gave him this gig.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's where it leaves us. And man, it was such a thrill. I just remember these credits rolling and just getting all the chills and being absolutely euphoric that I was back in the realm of Twin Peaks, and having the show had given me just enough in those 2 hours to let me know this is not the Twin Peaks we left behind, but we're also going to get these nuggets, kind
of almost like reassurances of when you get to the Roadhouse and you're like, it feels kind of like old times.
Yeah.
Whereas the rest of it's like, this is not old times anymore.
Yeah.
Like I said, I hadn't done like a full rewatch of this since it was first on, so I'm going to be honest, I went into this with a slight trepidation. I was like, what happens if I watch this and I don't like it? What if I go into this and go, well, after some time I'm not into this because I've spent so much time with Mr. Robot and stuff? But man, those 2 hours of TV are still some of my favourite television that I've ever seen.
Yeah, same. I mean, you cannot bottle, unfortunately, the feeling I got from watching those 2 episodes the first time. It was, man, as a long-time fan, it was just beautiful. And as a fan of Lynch's work in general, it was so exciting just to see him approach long-form storytelling and clearly being experimental. There was enough in these first 2 episodes to say, oh, Lynch is going to go full Lynch here. Yeah. So we kind of got an inkling of what we were in for, but it was still that thrill of, even at this point, the questions we had of how the fuck do you continue the story of Twin Peaks, none of them had been answered yet. I was still like, well, I still don't know. I guess I'm just going to strap in for another 16 hours and see how it unfolds.
For sure. So, speaking of the next 16 hours, Are we going to do 3 and 4 for our next episode?
I think that's what we should do, yeah. We might as well, since we're off and running, let's just keep the momentum going, and we'll play it by ear in terms of how we alternate this with our other coverage.
Oh, sure thing, Freddie.
Apples and pears, gaff. Yeah, I think that's how we'll play it.
Nice one. So next episode, expect a deep dive on parts 3 and 4 of Twin Peaks: The Return. In the meantime,
shout out to Alan, by the way, who hasn't died. He did get called away, so we had to complete this episode without him, in case you were wondering why he had suddenly fallen silent. We didn't eject him from the red room of our studio.
We didn't turn on the mad floor.
So yeah, thanks to Alan for coming along. It was a treat to have him, and he may make a revisit at some point. We'll see what happens. But yeah, it's nice to diversify the voices on the podcast by having not just 2 cis-het white males in their early 40s, but 3. They said it couldn't be done, folks, but we got there.
We did it.
Proved them wrong.
We're carrying that torch. We're keeping that flame alive for cis-het white podcasters in their 40s. But yeah, thanks so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, you know what to do. Call to action. Leave a like. Leave a review on your podcasting channel.
Yes, please.
Of choice.
We need reviews. Please leave reviews. Positive ones. Keep your negative ones. We don't want those.
Put them in non-existence.
Yep. They can stay in the glass box.
We will be back with episodes 3 and 4, and if you're wondering when we're going to be back on Mr. Robot, we'll be back on Mr. Robot for season 2 pretty soon as well.
Yeah, that is not going away. We will definitely be returning at some point, and then not too distant, so just stay tuned.
Mr. Robot, the return.
Mr. Robot, the return. James, how is your bottle working there? How's it looking?
Well, I don't know about you, Craig, but my bottle is looking about 50% full right now.
Is there another way of phrasing that, maybe?
I think there might be. Give me a second here. Actually, maybe about 52. Let me just... That's more like it. That, Craig, with that one sip, has left me with what I would categorically define as half the bottle. Toodle pip.
riffSobriety, Episode 19, The Thin White Eye of the Duck, was conceived by Craig Woods and James Hamilton, edited by James Hamilton, and is a production of Half the Bottle. This episode's special guest was Alan Todd, from the Big Glasgow Comics page and related podcast. Check out the links in the episode description. The theme music is Colossal Estates, by Errors, available on Rock Action Records, and Shadow, by Chromatics, available on Italians Do It Better. We've got the coffee on, so come visit us at facebook.com/fsobrietypodcast, Instagram at fsobrietypodcast, on Twitter at fsobrietycast, and search YouTube for fsobriety podcast. Don't forget, you can listen to the eclectic and absurdly long fsobriety jukebox by following the link in the episode description, featuring every piece of music, even so much as hinted at in the show. Wherever you find us, leave us a like and a comment, it really helps. You can go out now.
Hello and welcome once again to fSobriety. Nope. So I just got my mind went blank.
You should never meet your heroes. You should never meet your heroes. It's true what they say.
It's a dream. We live inside a dream.
It's like Bowie's in the room.
The thin white duck. The thin white eye of the duck.
Nice.